The knife in sleep. What if the sharpest pain you've ever felt didn't come from a wound but from a dream? It begins like this, just a dream, one among many. You're asleep, safe in your bed. But suddenly, you're no longer in that familiar space. The dream forms around you like a scene you didn't ask to enter. Dim lighting, strange shadows, maybe a figure standing just beyond what you can see clearly. And then it happens. A stabbing sensation. A knife. You don't see it. You just feel it. The cold, the pressure, the shock. You jolt awake, gasping, heart pounding, and yet nothing's there. No blood, no wound, just a phantom pain where your mind swears the blade entered. You think maybe it's your imagination. Maybe you slept in a strange position. But the ache doesn't go away. It lingers through the day. It returns the next night, and the night after. It feels as if something reached across the boundary of sleep and branded you with something you can't explain. This is not fiction. Around the world, people have reported dreams of being stabbed, burned, or even shot, and then waking up with the echo of that trauma etched into their flesh. No mark, no scar, just a pain that medical tests can't explain. They go to doctors. X-rays come back clean. MRIs show nothing. Yet the pain continues. And worse, it seems to carry memory. Not just the physical pain, but the emotional impact of betrayal, terror, or confusion they felt in the dream. Science has a name for part of this phenomenon: somatic dreaming. It's the idea that physical sensations can be mirrored or induced within dreams. For example, if someone touches your arm while you're sleeping, your dream might incorporate it as being brushed by a tree or grabbed by a stranger. But this doesn't fully explain the reverse, when a dream seems to create pain that persists into waking life. One theory suggests it's psychosomatic pain, where emotional stress or trauma is converted into physical symptoms. The mind essentially writes a memory into the body. Another theory? Sleep paralysis. During sleep paralysis episodes, people report hallucinations of attackers, dark figures pressing on their chest or stabbing them. The fear is so intense, the body internalizes it. But the cases that defy explanation go deeper. One man from Brazil dreamed he was attacked in a long corridor, stabbed in the side, left to crawl in pain. He woke up gasping, and the pain remained. Doctors found nothing wrong. He said the pain haunted him for over 6 months. Another woman from Japan dreamed of a faceless entity slicing her arm. When she awoke, there was no cut, but she could barely lift her arm for days. No physical reason, no prior condition. Could the brain be so powerful that it can simulate injury so thoroughly it convinces the body? Or are these dreams more than just dreams? Some researchers are beginning to wonder whether extreme dreams like these are tapping into something else entirely, a different layer of consciousness, a shared psychic network, or even a memory from a different version of ourselves in another reality. The pain then wouldn't be imagined, it would be transferred. A wound inflicted on the self, but not this self. Then there's the strange temporal twist. Some people report dreaming of being stabbed or injured, and then, months or years later, sustaining an injury in that exact location. They feel as if the dream was a warning or a prophecy. But what if it wasn't about time? What if the dream had always been a bleed-through, your mind remembering something it hadn't lived yet? The subconscious mind is still one of the most mysterious frontiers in science. We spend roughly 1/3 of our lives asleep, wandering through the architecture of dreams. And in those dreams, we are often vulnerable. There are no rules, no boundaries, just raw experience. And sometimes, violence. Sometimes we don't walk away unscathed. What makes the knife in sleep so disturbing is not just the idea of feeling pain from a dream, it's that the pain persists, that it haunts, that it reshapes the waking self. You begin to fear sleep. You start to question reality. You run your fingers over skin that remembers what it never endured. You wonder if you were attacked by something that didn't exist, or worse, something that does, but lives in a realm you can't reach while awake. If you've ever felt this, if you've ever woken from a dream in agony, confused and terrified, know you are not alone. This isn't weakness. It isn't delusion. It's a fracture between the dream world and the waking world, and some people are simply more open to the impact. You might never find the source of that pain. You might never get a diagnosis. But deep down, part of you will always know it happened. You'll remember the cold, the blade, the scream that didn't make it out of your sleeping mouth. And every night afterward, even if the pain fades, you'll sleep a little less deeply. Because now you know the worst wounds might come not from the world, but from the dreams that refuse to let you go. And next time you feel something watching you while you sleep, ask yourself, is it just your imagination, or is it the thing that brought the knife last time, waiting to return? The girl without eyes. What if the darkness behind your eyes isn't just absence, but a presence waiting to be seen? You dreamed of her. At first, she was just a shadow. No words, no sound, just stillness. But she came every night, unmoving, with her head tilted slightly to one side. A girl, 10, maybe 12, wearing a tattered white dress. Her skin was pale as milk, her hair draped forward, covering most of her face. And where her eyes should have been, nothing. Smooth, unbroken skin, no sockets, no lids, no orbs. Just absence. At first, it was just disturbing. Another nightmare, you thought. But she returned again the next night, and the next. Each time she was closer, still not moving, not speaking, just staring with those hollow non-eyes. You'd wake up and sweat, the image burning into your skull. But it didn't stop there. One morning, you noticed your vision was foggy. You blinked it away, rubbed your eyes, blamed it on sleep, on allergies, on dry air. But it persisted. Reading became harder. Light felt too bright. Faces blurred at the edges. You visited a doctor. No infection, no damage, no medical cause. They called it unexplained visual deterioration. Gave you drops. Told you to rest. But the dreams didn't let you. In one dream, you tried to scream at her. You begged her to stop. That's when she moved. Her hand slowly rose to her face, and with her slender fingers, she tapped where her eyes should have been, then pointed at yours. That's when you woke up in pain, clutching your skull as if your eyes were being squeezed from the inside. You checked the mirror. Your eyes were red, veins blooming like spiderwebs. And something else changed. During the day, you began to sense her, in reflections, in dark corners, in the space behind you. Not fully seen, but felt, like a pressure, a weight. Your mind screamed that it was just sleep deprivation. But a part of you, deeper, knew something was wrong in a way that medicine couldn't touch. People began to look at you strangely, asking if you were tired, if you were all right. You tried to explain once about the dreams, but no one believed you. Of course they didn't. Who would believe a story about a girl without eyes draining your vision? Bit by bit, until you met someone else, a woman in a waiting room at the ophthalmologist's office. She was older, in her 60s, with cloudy eyes. Cataracts, you thought. But then she leaned toward you and whispered, "She came to me too, when I was your age. She's still here." You froze, your throat dried. Her words sliced through the silence like a knife. "She takes," the woman said, "until there's nothing left to see." You fled that clinic, but now the dreams were different. You didn't just see her, you stood where she stood. You saw your own sleeping form. You were behind her, inside her, sharing her silence. And then, you didn't wake up, not fully. Your body moved through the day like it was on autopilot, but your consciousness was split, watching, floating, somewhere between sleep and waking. They call it dream intrusion in rare psychological reports. Sleep experts have recorded cases of people experiencing dream figures that manifest symptoms in waking life, symptoms without cause. It's been linked to psychosomatic vision loss, even hallucinations. But you know it's more than that. She wasn't a dream, she was an entity. And she wasn't born blind. She was made that way. Some say the girl was a real child once, part of a lost orphanage fire in the 1930s. Records were scarce, but whispers claim the children were subjected to cruel experiments to cleanse sin from their eyes, blinded not by accident, but by intention. Their spirits, trapped by pain, echo across dreams, seeking vision, seeking release. You think of that every time you feel the sting behind your eyes now. Every time the light dims. You feel her reaching again, wanting to see through you, to borrow your sight like a window. You avoid mirrors. Because when you do look sometimes, she's standing just behind you, not reflected, not imagined, present. And you realize she doesn't hate you. She's not punishing you. She's surviving, just as you are. Vision was stolen from her, and now she borrows from those who dream of her. Some vanish into sleep, some go blind, some become her next host. The girl without eyes is not a ghost. She's a cycle, a parasite of sight, and now she's within you. There's one final truth you haven't told anyone. One night, weeks ago, you dreamed again, but this time, you didn't see her. Instead, you were her. You felt her panic, her rage, her hunger to see again. And when you opened your mouth, it wasn't silence that came out, but your own voice. You screamed awake. And since then, no more dreams, just silence and darkness. The blur in your vision is near constant now. Edges of the world swim, lights bend. Doctors still find nothing. But you know the truth. She's not visiting anymore because she no longer has to. She's already inside, watching, through your eyes. The endless drowning. You never expected water to follow you into your waking life. It started as a dream, cold, still, quiet. A lake in winter, frozen over with a layer of ice so thin you could see through it, but thick enough to trap you beneath when it broke. In that dream, you drowned over and over. The sensation was agonizingly slow. No thrashing, no screaming, just a cold grip pulling you under, lungs begging for air as you stared up at the fading world through cracked ice. You didn't wake gasping. You didn't scream. You simply woke, sore, tight-chested, like something had clenched your ribs all night. And the next night, it returned. Again and again, the same dream, the same lake, the same breathless descent into stillness. Weeks passed, then months. You tried everything. Sleep aids, therapy, meditation. Nothing stopped it. The dream was relentless. And then, one night, it just ended. But the silence didn't. That dream never felt like a dream. It felt like a place, a memory, and your body remembered it like it was real. That's the part no one talks about, when trauma doesn't come from waking life, but from something your body still believes happened. You'd stand beside a pool or run a shower and feel the tension spike. Your skin would crawl near still water. You'd catch your breath as if your lungs were warning you, don't do it again, don't go under. Some people would call this a night terror, but that label is too soft, too clinical, because the body doesn't lie. Fear of water didn't come from childhood, from a known trauma, from anything you could name. It came from that dream, that endless lake, that place your mind visited so often it wore grooves into your neurons. And now, when your foot steps near a shoreline or your hand touches cold glass, your spine tenses. The dream never ended. It just seeped into muscle memory. There's a name for this phenomenon. Somatic echo. It's when the body stores pain that the brain cannot explain. The term is often used for survivors of extreme trauma, war, abuse, disaster. But the mind doesn't discriminate between waking pain and dream pain if the dream is vivid enough. The nervous system reacts the same way. Your pupils dilate, your pulse spikes, your breath shallows. You might not consciously remember why, but your body does. It remembers lungs that once collapsed, even if they never really did. This isn't as rare as you might think. There are countless stories of people waking up with aches, bruises, tension knots, all after a single recurring dream. A man dreamed of being crushed by a train every night for a year, and even 10 years later, he flinches when he hears a horn. A woman dreamt she was stabbed in the abdomen, and years later she developed pain in the exact spot with no medical explanation. Dreams can etch trauma into flesh without a single external wound. In the case of the lake, it's not just about water, it's about suffocation, helplessness, being trapped under something that feels transparent but impenetrable. How many people carry that same dream in different forms, stuck under expectations, buried beneath silence, frozen in relationships that mirror ice? These dreams become metaphors too powerful to ignore. Your body isn't reacting to water, it's reacting to what the water meant, that inescapable pressure, that quiet end, that surrender. And here's the paradox. You can't run from it because it's inside you. You can drain the tub, avoid the lake, cancel beach trips, but still, that feeling shows up. Your heart skips when the room is too quiet. You jolt when the cold hits your skin. You flinch at reflections. These are not random moments. They're echoes, ripples from a place you swam through in sleep so many times your body thought it was your new home. What if it was? What if dreams are a kind of experience stored on another level of memory? There's a theory called dream engrams that our most emotionally intense dreams leave permanent neurological marks the same way real memories do. Your dream of drowning might not be a metaphor. It might be a lived event, just in a reality your waking self wasn't invited to. That's why it haunts you. That's why your body can't forget. And some researchers even argue that recurring dreams like this are not just trauma loops, but neural rehearsals. Your brain trying to train itself for survival, even in symbolic terms. Drowning in a dream could be your mind's way of preparing for emotional suffocation, of forcing you to learn to breathe differently, to fight in silence, to recognize the surface before it cracks. But maybe it wasn't rehearsal. Maybe it was punishment. Maybe it was a memory from another life bleeding through the cracks of this one, a karmic replay, a forgotten version of you, trapped in an event that didn't get closure, still echoing through subconscious corridors. And so, you walk through life, avoiding lakes, fearing showers, flinching at stillness. People say, it was just a dream. But that dismisses the weight of what it did to you. You didn't just imagine drowning, you felt it. You remember it, not with thought, but with bone. And every cell in your body learned one lesson: never again. But maybe, just maybe, that's the beginning of healing, not by denying it, but by understanding that the fear has a shape, that your body isn't betraying you, it's trying to protect you from a danger that once felt real. Maybe one day you'll stand at the edge of a lake again, and maybe for a moment the water won't feel like an enemy. Maybe your breath won't seize. Maybe instead of drowning, you'll remember how to swim. Not because the dream is gone, but because you finally faced it awake. The Ice Child. It began as a dream, like most things we dismiss too quickly. A snow-covered clearing, silent and still. No wind, no bird song, just the hush of falling flakes and the sharp sting of cold that felt far too real for sleep. You knelt in that frozen place, not knowing why you were there, only that something called you. And in the whiteness, you saw the child. He was no older than a year, pale, unmoving, eyes glassy like ice, lips the color of dusk. You lifted him gently, and the moment your fingers touched his frozen skin, something in your chest fractured. He wasn't afraid. He looked at you with pleading eyes, and he said only one thing: "Please don't forget me." And then he melted in your arms, like frost on warm skin. You woke up choking on sobs you didn't understand, clutching your chest as if you had just let something die. But it was just a dream, wasn't it? You didn't tell anyone. How could you? You didn't want to scare your sister, who had just announced she was expecting. It was early, and she was hopeful, glowing in that way only expectant mothers do. You kept the dream to yourself, like it might vanish if you ignored it. But it didn't. It returned the next night, and the next. The child, the snow, the same desperate voice. Don't forget me. There's something cruel about premonitions. They don't come with context. They don't tell you what to change or how to stop what's coming. They just leave you haunted. You hoped it was your mind playing tricks, some weird fragment of anxiety, until your sister miscarried. The world collapsed quietly. There were no screams, just a hospital room with white walls too clean to hold something so tragic. You held her hand. You tried to be strong. You said what everyone says. It wasn't your fault. You'll try again. It wasn't meant to be. But you didn't believe any of it, because when they let you see the baby, the breath left your body. It was him, not a resemblance, not a maybe. It was the child from the dream. Same pale skin, same small, cold hands, the same look in his eyes, even though they never opened. That's the moment your reality split. That's the moment you stopped believing dreams were just dreams, because somehow you had already held him. And suddenly, your memory of the dream sharpened. You remembered the way the snow had fallen like ash, the way your heart cracked open when he begged you not to forget. And now it all made sense. He wasn't a symbol. He wasn't a metaphor. He was real. And he came to you first because he needed to be remembered. Science will tell you this is coincidence. The brain, in grief or anxiety, makes connections that feel prophetic. Dreams replay our emotions, filter our fears, simulate scenarios to prepare us. But science cannot explain why the baby looked exactly the same, or why, weeks before it happened, your subconscious painted a perfect portrait of a child who didn't yet exist. Some call it a psychic echo, a phenomenon where your mind, untethered in dreams, dips into a deeper stream of time. Past, present, and future all merge in sleep. You drift into a place where souls pass through, where lives flash before they begin, and sometimes, just sometimes, those souls reach out, not to change the future, but to be witnessed. And maybe that's what this was, a child who knew he wouldn't stay, a soul passing through the veil, hoping for one moment of contact. And you were the one he found, not because you were special, but because you were open, because you would remember him. What does it mean to carry a memory no one else believes, to grieve for someone the world says never lived? It's a quiet kind of sorrow, a grief with no funeral. But you felt it. And every time it snows now, you pause. You remember the stillness, the voice, the child. And your sister, she felt it too, even if she never saw the dream. She speaks of her lost baby with tenderness, as if he left a whisper behind. And when she lit a candle one night for him, you saw her fingers tremble just like yours had in the dream. You didn't say anything. You didn't have to. Grief, when it's shared like that, doesn't need words. Maybe he's not gone. Maybe some part of him lingers, watching, waiting. Maybe that's why the dream stopped after the miscarriage. He didn't need to ask any more. You remembered. You still do. And if dreams are doors, then what was that frozen field but a waiting room? A space between worlds where the ones who leave too soon can still be held once more. You were chosen to carry that moment, to ensure that even if no one else ever knew his face, he was known. Even if no one else ever spoke his name, he was real. You never dreamed of him again. But every time you see a snowflake drift past your window, it feels like a nod, a soft reminder that somewhere, on the edge of the veil, a child once frozen found warmth in your arms, if only for a moment. The voice in the wall. It always began just as you were drifting off, not fully asleep, but not truly awake either. That soft, liminal space where the mind unhooks from the body and dreams begin to blur into something else. That's when you heard it, a voice, not inside your head, not imagined, but coming from behind the bedroom wall. It wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It spoke with calm precision, like it knew exactly how close you were to sleep. And then it said your name. Not just your name. It said things it shouldn't know. Secrets. Personal things. Memories you never told anyone. A broken toy from your childhood. A sentence you once whispered to yourself in the dark. A fear you carried quietly for years. You froze. Your heart thudded against your chest. You listened harder, hoping it was your brain misfiring. A dream fragment. Auditory pareidolia. Anything. But it kept talking. Calm. Rhythmic. Intimate. Not threatening. But aware. Deeply aware. The first time you convinced yourself it was a dream. Maybe the second time, too. But then you began noticing something worse. The voice didn't just appear in sleep. It started speaking when you were waking. Just as you rose to consciousness, before you opened your eyes, it was there, behind the wall, waiting. People describe this as sleep paralysis or hypnagogic hallucination. But those terms don't quite capture what happens when the hallucination talks back. When it references things it shouldn't know. When it calls you by the pet name only your grandmother used. When it sings the tune your brother made up when you were 6. And when it finishes your thoughts before you even finish thinking them. This isn't just memory retrieval. It's something deeper. It's like the voice is watching your thoughts, not from within, but from the other side. There's a phenomenon known as exploding head syndrome, where people hear loud noises as they drift into sleep. Bangs, screams, static. But this wasn't that. This voice was smooth, calculated. It didn't scream. It whispered. Some say it's your subconscious, that you're hearing your own voice, filtered through dream logic. But if that were true, why does it sound nothing like you? Why does it say things you've never consciously thought? Why does it sometimes answer questions you haven't asked yet? And more terrifying, why does it know when you're listening? One woman reported hearing a voice behind her headboard every night for months. At first, it just repeated her name. Then it began listing dates, birthdays, deaths. Then came warnings. She recorded herself sleeping, hoping to catch it. Nothing. But when she tried to ignore the voice, it laughed. When she moved bedrooms, it followed. That's the part no one explains. How these voices sometimes aren't bound to location. They aren't tied to walls or homes. They're tied to you. It's possible that what we call a wall is only a symbol, a metaphor for the boundary between consciousness and something else, a veil. And this voice? Maybe it's what's on the other side of that veil. Maybe the wall is thin only when we're most vulnerable, when our mind is in flux, when our defenses are low, when we are barely tethered to our physical form. The wall becomes a speaker, the voice, a message. But from where? Some suggest that in moments of altered consciousness, like during sleep transitions, the brain becomes a receiver, that we tune into other frequencies of thought, stray signals not meant for us. But if that were true, why does the voice speak to you? It isn't garbled. It isn't random. It addresses you. It waits for your attention. Sometimes it reacts when you try to ignore it. That doesn't sound like a stray signal. That sounds like intent. Over time, the voice may begin to shape behavior. You don't sleep in that room anymore, or if you do, you leave a fan on for white noise. You've told yourself you imagined it, but you still wake at 3:17 a.m. You still glance toward that wall, and sometimes you think you hear your name, not in the wall anymore, but inside your own thoughts. What happens when something external becomes internal? When a voice you once heard out there now begins to echo in your waking mind? That's the final stage, when it no longer needs the wall. You remember when it first said something you hadn't admitted even to yourself. That's when the fear became something else, something primal. Because if the voice is real, and if it's inside now, how do you know which thoughts are yours? You start to notice small changes. Words you use that don't feel like yours. A turn of phrase that sounds like the voice. You start to question your memory. Did I think that? Or did it whisper that into me? That's when people stop talking about it. Not because it stops, but because talking seems to make it stronger, more vivid. Like saying it out loud opens the wall again. And deep down, Part of you wonders if the voice was never behind the wall, if the wall was only ever inside your mind, a partition, a protective barrier, and something has been knocking on it for a long time, patiently. There's no scientific consensus on this. Sleep researchers can point to brain waves, limbic system activation, subconscious processing. But no scan can explain awareness. No EEG can measure intent. And the voice, whatever it is, feels intentional. So you don't talk about it anymore. But you leave a light on. You sleep with music. You avoid silence, because silence is when the wall speaks again. And in the quiet, the voice still knows your name. And now, it's whispering again. The church with no doors. It always began the same way, in silence. A sky choked with dark clouds, windless, still. And beneath it, a church, abandoned, decaying, impossibly old. You knew it wasn't real, not at first. It only visited in dreams, but it felt like memory, like a place you once knew but forgot. The structure loomed with its sharp Gothic spires and broken stained glass. Ivy curled through cracked stone. Time had touched everything, but not eroded its authority. Inside, it smelled of mold and ash. The pews were rotting. The altar was caked in dust. There were no voices, no prayers, no exit. That was the part that always terrified you. No matter how many times you circled, no matter how fast you ran, the doors were gone. Not locked, gone. There was no way out. You were inside, alone, and the walls knew it. The silence pressed on you like weight, like something unseen was watching, waiting, not to harm you, but to keep you there, forever. You'd wake, gasping, heart racing, clothes soaked in sweat. The dream never changed, but it grew longer, more vivid. At times you'd find your hands bleeding in your sleep, nails torn as if clawing at stone. You tried therapy, sleep tracking. You stopped watching horror films, cut caffeine, prayed. But the church returned. Then came the vacation. A remote countryside, far from the city. You weren't even supposed to be on that road. It was a wrong turn, a broken GPS, a whim. And there it was, nestled in the valley, a church. Your breath caught. It couldn't be. But it was. The windows, the ivy, the broken glass, the precise lean of its steeple. You pulled over, drawn like gravity was guiding you. The path was overgrown, yet somehow you knew where to step. Your feet remembered. With each step, your pulse grew louder, echoing in your ears like the first time you dreamed it. And then you stood at the threshold and realized there was no door, just an arched stone frame. No wood, no hinges, no way to close it. Still, your body hesitated. Instincts screamed, but your legs moved. Inside, it was the same. The dust, the altar, the decaying pews, exactly like the dream. The smell triggered your memory like lightning, and then the silence. Not the quiet of nature, but the kind that felt manufactured, like the world was holding its breath, like sound had been drained from the air. You spun to leave, and froze. The entrance was gone. Not closed, not blocked. Gone. Just wall. Panic swelled in you like a tide. You clawed. You shouted. No one came. You ran along the walls, searching for any crack, any mistake. But it was seamless. You were alone, just as the dream had always promised. But this time, you were awake. You didn't pass out. You didn't blink into your bed. You stayed. Hours passed, or was it days? You couldn't tell. Your watch stopped working. Your phone showed no signal, then no battery, then static. You screamed until your voice disappeared. Then the whispers began, low, distant, like they were inside the stone. Not words, but pulses, like messages meant for something deeper than language. Eventually, the fear gave way to something stranger, recognition. You belonged here, somehow, not because you deserved it, but because the church had always been waiting. You fell asleep there, cold and aching, and when you woke, you were lying on your hotel bed. The sheets were damp, your nails were chipped, and your shoes were still muddy. You checked the map. The road no longer existed. No valley, no detour, nothing matched. But you remember the weight, the walls, the sound that wasn't a sound. And now, every time you dream, it starts not at the entrance, but deeper, as if the church remembers you too, as if it's getting closer to the center. And when you close your eyes, you swear you hear the stone whispering again, because maybe the church isn't a place. Maybe it's a prison, or worse, maybe it's home. You thought it might have been sleep paralysis, some subconscious trauma manifesting itself in repeated architecture. But this wasn't just about fear, it was familiarity. The layout, the cracks in the walls, even the patterns in the stained glass matched your dreams exactly. You hadn't imagined this place, you remembered it. That night, back at the hotel, you couldn't sleep. Why? Not because of fear, but because you could still smell the mold, still hear the faint rustle that wasn't wind. Something was calling, or remembering, and it remembered you. You started researching old towns, folklore, churches that vanished from official records. You found nothing, no historical evidence that a church ever stood in that valley. But then someone on an obscure message board replied, one sentence only, "You made it out once, don't go back." You tried to forget. Weeks passed. Life returned to routine, but the dreams returned with new intensity. Now the church wasn't empty. You never saw what was there, but you felt it, following, mimicking your movements, sometimes whispering your own voice back at you. You'd wake up with foreign words in your head. You tried to write them down. They didn't belong to any known language. One night, you dreamt of someone else entering, a stranger. You watched from within the church as they stepped through the arch. You shouted warnings, but your voice didn't carry. They looked around, smiled, and then they too disappeared behind the walls. When you woke, you checked the news. A missing hiker, last seen in that region. You know now the church is not just a dream echo. It's a fixed point, a place outside time that some minds touch, a trap for wanderers and dreamers, a mirror for those who run too deep. And you're still not sure if you ever truly escaped. Maybe you're still inside. Maybe we all are. The grave with your name. What if your death was already carved in stone, long before you lived? It always starts with a dream, a fog-covered cemetery, the crunch of gravel beneath your feet. The air feels too cold for sleep, too detailed for fantasy. You walk between crumbling tombstones, some with names half-eaten by moss, others far too recent. But one catches your attention, a headstone at the end of a crooked path. And when you kneel down, your heart stops. Your full name, your birth date, and a death date. Blank. Just waiting. You jolt awake, sweating, breathless. But it was just a dream, right? Until it's not. Weeks later, you visit a distant town, maybe for work, a family event, or a last-minute road trip. You take a detour. You get lost. Or maybe something pulls you there, and that's when you see it. The cemetery from your dream. The fog isn't there, but everything else is, right down to the path, the broken fence, and the rows of graves. Something tells you to follow. And there it is. The headstone, your name, same spelling, same birth date, still blank where the death date should be. This is not urban legend. People have reported this. Across countries, languages, belief systems, people dream of a specific graveyard they've never visited, only to later find it exists. Not just exists, but contains a headstone with their full name etched into the stone, sometimes first and last, sometimes even the middle name. The odds of coincidence? Astronomical. The emotional impact? Earth-shattering. Your logical brain fights to explain it. Maybe the dream was a reconstruction of cemeteries you've seen in passing. Maybe the name is just a match. But deep down, something colder whispers, this was never a coincidence. This was a warning, or worse, this was recognition. What does it mean to find your name on a grave that predates your visit? Did someone know you'd come? Is the stone a mistake or a message? One possible explanation lies in the realm of cryptomnesia, a phenomenon where your brain retrieves a memory but disguises it as something new. Maybe you passed the grave in childhood. Maybe you saw it in a book, a news clip, an article buried deep in your mind, and your brain used it in your dream. But this theory collapses under one crucial detail. Most of the time, these people have never been anywhere near that town, state, or country. There is no source. The information appears from nowhere or from elsewhere. Some believe it's a case of past life echoes, that the grave belongs not to you, but to a previous you, a life lived, forgotten, but not erased. The dream is your mind stumbling over leftover data, a remnant of who you once were. The grave becomes a breadcrumb, a forgotten chapter. But what if it isn't the past at all? What if the dream and the grave are tied to a future already written? In 1972, a man in Quebec dreamed of a funeral. He described it in detail to friends, the location, the suit he wore, the woman in red crying in the distance. Years later, on a spontaneous hiking trip, he passed a cemetery and froze. The layout was identical. He walked through it, shaking, and found a headstone with his full name. Same middle initial, same surname. It had been carved 5 years earlier. The grave was empty, reserved, waiting. He died in a car crash 3 years later, buried there. This is not an isolated case. Some people find these graves and choose to stay away forever. Others return again and again, obsessed with uncovering the meaning. Some try to contact the cemetery's caretakers. Many find nothing, no record of purchase, no local who remembers who commissioned the stone. It's as if the grave appeared, just for them. This leads to the most disturbing possibility, that time isn't linear, that your future self, or something observing your timeline, planted that grave like a marker, like a checkpoint, not to frighten you, but to remind you. Of what? That depends on the interpretation. For some, it's a call to action, a wake-up, a chance to change course. For others, it's a countdown. What happens when you finally visit that cemetery and the blank space has changed? The date is filled in. And it's today's date? There's a psychological theory that the subconscious mind is capable of receiving stimuli from the environment that the conscious mind filters out. Perhaps in that cemetery dream, your brain tapped into something you weren't meant to perceive, an echo, a ripple, or maybe a message from the simulation. A reminder that your story has already been outlined, coded, structured, and the grave is just one of the saved checkpoints in the system. The existential weight of finding your name on a grave isn't just about death, it's about the unraveling of self. You begin to question how much of your life is truly yours. You stare at the stone and feel something watching you, not from the bushes or behind a tree, but from behind time itself. Measuring, recording, waiting. So what do you do? Do you take a photo and walk away? Do you visit every year to check the inscription? Or do you dig? Do you open the soil and see if anything's already buried there? Clothes, photos, a coffin-shaped emptiness that perfectly fits your dimensions? The grave with your name isn't just a nightmare. It's a mirror held up to the illusion of control. A reminder that no matter how far you run, some places are written into your timeline. Some truths are too heavy to erase. So if you ever dream of a cemetery, take notes. Remember the names, the symbols, the turns, because you might find it one day. And if you do, and you see your name carved into stone, don't panic. Just remember, the grave doesn't mean it's the end, but it might mean something else was always watching. The thread. Through skin. It started like a whisper through your nerves. Not pain, not quite. More like the awareness of being touched without contact. You'd sleep, and in those dreams, they came. Tall, faceless figures, moving in silence. Not human, not alien, just presence. They didn't chase, didn't speak. They worked, one at each limb, one at your head, one near your feet. You couldn't move. You couldn't scream. They threaded something through you. You never saw the tools, only felt them. The gentle puncture of something impossibly thin sliding into your skin, not sharp, but inevitable. And the thread, cool, pulsing faintly, would weave through your arms, your legs, your back. Seam by seam, you were stitched, not shut, but connected. To what? You never knew. You'd wake with a jolt, heart racing, and there, on your arms, lines, not wounds, not scars, just faint impressions, like a memory left on your flesh. You'd brush them. They'd vanish by morning, but you remembered, every time, where the thread went, how it moved, the pattern. You told no one. How could you? I'm being sewn in my sleep isn't something that invites conversation, but the dreams kept returning, and each time the stitching grew more elaborate, around your ribs, your jaw. One morning your eyelids felt heavy. You looked close in the mirror, the faintest crosshatch at the edge of your lashes. You wore long sleeves, hid the signs. Even though they faded, you knew they'd been there. You felt them still, like phantom thread running beneath the skin. You couldn't prove it, but every time you touched your arm, there was resistance, like your body wasn't yours anymore. It belonged to the pattern. You started documenting it, sketching what you could remember, the configurations, spirals, grids, ancient-looking glyphs that appeared just before you woke. Some of the patterns hurt to draw. You'd get migraines, nausea. One day, your nose bled after sketching a symbol that looked like an infinite loop piercing a triangle. You burned that page. You searched online, deep forums, hidden archives. You found whispers, others who dreamt of stitching. Some described it as surgery, others, ritual. One user claimed they woke once in the exact position as their dream, arms out, legs apart, neck tilted, and felt thread inside them for days. Another said the figures were repairing something broken in humanity. Others believed the opposite. You wondered what side you were on. Then came the night where they didn't stitch. They unstitched. You dreamed of a thread unraveling from your wrist. One long pull. You watched the pattern loosen. Your fingers curled. Your shoulder dropped. It felt wrong. Not painful. Not relieving. Just incomplete. You woke feeling fragile. Your limbs disconnected. Like your joints had forgotten how to belong to each other. You stumbled getting out of bed. Your reflection was crooked. Your face slightly off. Like your features had shifted and reattached just a few millimeters away. No one else noticed. But you did. Every time you blinked, the edges of your vision trembled, like seams slipping loose. You wore gloves now, even in heat. You didn't want to see the lines, even if they were invisible. You started hearing things, quiet threads dragging over hardwood, like fishing wire being pulled across the floor, in empty rooms, at night. One evening, you swear you saw something move under your skin, just for a second. Your doctor said stress, anxiety, probably sleep paralysis, but you knew. The figures weren't figments, they were engineers, or worse, editors. And you were the manuscript, your body a draft, rewritten nightly. You found one last thread once. It was real. You woke clutching your arm, certain you'd pulled something, and in your palm, thin and translucent, one line of filament, too fine to be string, too stiff to be hair. You held it to the light, and it shimmered, then dissolved, like it had never existed, except it had. You didn't sleep for days, but it didn't matter. They came anyway, and this time, they stitched you to something else. You weren't alone in the dream anymore. Another body, parallel to yours, breathing in sync. You couldn't see its face, but when you woke, your hand wasn't yours. A scar you never earned crossed the knuckle. A mole appeared near your shoulder. You cried without knowing why. Grief that didn't belong to you, like someone had uploaded a memory into your skin. Now you wonder, how much of you has already been rewritten? How many borrowed pieces do you wear? Maybe the stitching wasn't to hold you together, but to trade parts with someone else. Someone who needed what you had, or someone they thought deserved more, or someone far away, being unstitched. So you could become them. You're not sure which idea is worse, and each night, when you close your eyes, you feel the itch beneath the skin. Not pain, just pressure. The pressure of being chosen, rebuilt, sewn back into a shape you never consented to. And every morning, you run your fingers down your arms. Not for wounds, but to check what story they wrote in your skin this time, to see which parts still belong to you, if any. The memory that bled. It started as déjà vu, those strange moments when you walk into a room you've never entered before and feel like you've lived it. But for you, it didn't stop there. The dreams began like gentle echoes, fragments from somewhere else, not nightmares, not fantasies, but fully lived memories of a life you were never told belonged to you, a life that didn't exist in this reality. You stood in foreign streets, speaking languages you never studied. You wore clothes from another era, smelled the dust of a desert you've never touched. You laughed with people you've never met, but somehow loved like family. And the strangest part? You remembered details, vivid, aching details. The sound of someone's voice, the way a candle flickered in a stone room, the scar on your wrist, until you woke and saw it wasn't there. At first, it felt like creative dreaming. You told yourself it was just your brain's way of purging stories, recycling forgotten films, and passing images. But then came the bleed-through. You began forgetting things from your real life. You called your friend by a name from the dream. You swore you'd been to places that don't exist. You told stories at dinner that never happened, but felt more true than anything else. And then it got worse. You found yourself grieving people who aren't dead, because in that other life, they were. You woke up crying over a child you never had. You caught yourself walking with a limp that faded by noon. Your brain and body were carrying burdens from a timeline no one else could see. Science would call this cryptomnesia, when your brain mistakes imagination for memory. But even the most hardened neuroscientist would flinch if they lived what you have. Because this isn't like confusing a dream with reality. This is reality itself bending. You no longer know where your true memories stop and the echoes begin. It's called identity dissociation, they might say. Or perhaps a form of false memory syndrome. But what if it's more than that? What if your soul has worn many names? And what you're remembering isn't fiction, but resonance, like vibrations from a past life still humming in your bones, desperate to be heard. There are cultures that never forgot this possibility. In Tibetan traditions, vivid past life memories are taken as sacred truths. Children in remote villages have pointed to old photos and named relatives they couldn't possibly know. In India, some children recite entire histories of lives that ended decades before their birth, later verified with chilling precision. These aren't outliers. They're fragments of a truth we've forgotten how to believe. And if reincarnation is real, not as poetic metaphor, but as soul migration, then what you're experiencing might be a fracture in the veil, a moment where the stitching came loose and your consciousness slipped sideways, remembering a self that still lives somewhere inside you. But the tragedy is, our minds aren't built to hold two lives at once. You forget where you left your keys because you're remembering where you buried a book centuries ago. You hesitate at a stranger's face because something in you screams, "We knew each other." You feel haunted not by ghosts, but by versions of yourself that never truly died. You might begin to lose trust in your memory. In conversation, you falter, not because you're lying, but because you genuinely can't tell which life a memory belongs to. And the people around you, they don't see it. They see confusion, maybe madness. They tell you to rest, to ground yourself, to stay present. But how do you stay present when the past keeps rising like floodwater? And then comes the bleeding, the irreversible fusion of timelines. A scar appears in a dream, and now your wrist aches for no reason. You remember holding someone's hand on a mountaintop, and the next day, You smell their perfume in a place you've never been. You try to ignore it, but the more you resist, the louder it gets. The dreams become waking moments. The waking moments begin to feel like dreams. You ask yourself, did I invent this? Did I want this? But no one wants to forget who they are. And that's the danger, because the more these past life memories bloom, the more your current identity starts to erode. And what are you then? A mosaic? A ghost piloting flesh? Or just the sum of all the people you've ever been? You try to anchor yourself. Photos, journals, old conversations. But none of it stops the quiet terror of not knowing which life you're living. Because some nights when you stare into the mirror, you half expect another face to blink back. A face you remember better than your own. And yet, somewhere in that fear is a strange kind of beauty, a bittersweet truth that maybe we are more than one story. That identity is fluid, layered, eternal. That the soul remembers even when the brain forgets. You may never separate what was from what wasn't. But perhaps the purpose is not to divide them. Perhaps the dream and the life are threads of the same tapestry, and you are not broken. You are simply vast. So, if you sometimes forget what's real, maybe it's because reality itself is layered, and somewhere inside you, another life is still echoing, still calling, still bleeding through the cracks. And maybe that's how you know you're alive. The heart in the jar. It started as a dream. Or at least, that's what you told yourself. You woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The image burned into your mind. A refrigerator door opening in the middle of the night. You weren't hungry. You didn't walk there. But there you stood, staring into the dim interior light, and inside, on the middle shelf, was a glass jar. It was old, cloudy. The label had peeled away. And inside, floating in something thick and amber-colored, was a heart. It wasn't dead. It wasn't preserved. It beat. Slow, deliberate pulses. Not frantic like fear, not erratic like panic, but purposeful, as if it was aware it was being watched, as if it knew you, and you couldn't look away. You told yourself it was just a dream, a strange, unsettling dream. But when you woke, the sense of unease clung to you. Your chest felt tight, your breath shallow. You passed your own fridge that morning with caution, irrationally expecting to see something waiting for you on the other side. But nothing was there. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Days passed. The dream faded, but the feeling didn't. Then, one day in the grocery store, you turned a corner near the preserves aisle and felt it again. Pressure. A subtle pull beneath your ribs, like something inside you tightened. Your eyes flicked to a row of jars. Pickled things. Hearts of palm. Red jars. Amber jars. One with a dark smear inside. And your chest beat faster. Not like panic, but in synchrony with something else. Something not visible, but present. This is where science would step in. Call it a lingering emotional imprint, a conditioned fear response, a leftover echo of dream anxiety. The brain, after all, is known to associate places and sensations. If you felt fear in your dream fridge, then a similar setting could re-trigger that memory. But what if it wasn't your brain reacting? What if the jar, the heart, was never symbolic? There's a theory in certain psychological corners called residual dream anchoring. The idea is simple. Some dreams don't end. They find something in the waking world to attach themselves to, a color, a sound, a scent, or a shape. They slip through, like shadows through cracked glass, and lodge themselves in symbols. And once they're anchored, they feed. From you, your attention, your emotion, your fear. And maybe the heart in the jar wasn't metaphor. Maybe it wasn't yours either. Maybe it was something else's. And now, it watches through the glass of every jar you pass, waiting for you to acknowledge it again. Many people report recurring dream imagery that follows them. A face in a mirror, a phone ringing that they later hear in real life, a door that appears in both dream and waking memory. But the heart is different because it isn't just seen, it's felt. Your body reacts like it's being pulled toward it, or repelled. Either way, the chest constriction is real, like a phantom limb, but internal, like you left part of yourself inside the jar. One man described a similar experience. He dreamed of a box in his attic. Inside was something living, but sealed. When he woke, his attic door was open. Every time he passed a storage aisle after that, he felt nauseous, as if the dream hadn't ended, only changed location. He began to suspect he hadn't dreamed at all, but remembered something that had been hidden from him. Is that what the jar is? A memory too old to recall, a fear too primal to name. There are ancient legends of objects that watch, fetishes, vessels, relics, but they don't need to be sacred to carry energy. What if the heart in the jar wants to be remembered? What if it's not watching you but waiting for you to come back? When you walk past that aisle and your chest tightens, that might not be fear. That might be resonance, recognition, a frequency you've forgotten how to hear. And every time you don't look, every time you walk faster, it learns you're still afraid. It learns you haven't accepted it. But what would happen if you turned? If you reached for the jar that felt like the one in your dream? Would it still be sealed? Would it still be beating? Or would it be empty? Because the heart was never in the jar. Because it's in you now? And that tightening in your chest, that might not be fear at all. That might be the jar trying to open from the inside. You try to dismiss it. You rationalize. Maybe it was just an overactive imagination. Your brain cross-wiring fear with familiar objects. But the pattern doesn't break. It worsens. You start to notice how often jars appear in your daily life. In shows, in ads, in other people's kitchens. A moment of stillness, and you feel the tightness again. A pulse, sometimes slow, sometimes sharp. You begin to wonder if the jar is no longer a single object, but a signal. A symbol sent through your reality to remind you of something you've buried. A warning, or an invitation. A woman once claimed she had a similar experience, except it wasn't a jar, it was a lantern. In her dream, it pulsed like a heartbeat, dim red light blooming in the dark. She said the feeling was the same: dread, recognition, possession. Over months, the lantern began to appear in real life, first in antique stores, then on a neighbor's porch. Eventually, she found one exactly like it in a friend's attic. It didn't belong there. No one had ever seen it before, and it wasn't plugged in, but it flickered anyway. So maybe it's not about hearts or jars. Maybe it's about containers, objects that store something more than matter, more than memory, objects that store pieces of you or something watching you. The jar in the dream fridge may not have been a metaphor. It may have been a delivery, something placed where it knew you'd see it, like a calling card, like a countdown. There are theories in dream analysis that certain images are archetypal gates, symbols that appear when the boundary between the conscious and the unconscious weakens. A heart in a jar isn't just bizarre, it's deeply surgical, intentional. It says, "Look here, there's something vital you've sealed away." But what if you didn't seal it? What if something else did? You haven't opened that fridge the same way since. You haven't walked that grocery aisle without checking your breath. And even now, listening to this, you might be feeling the weight return. A dull thump, somewhere just beneath your ribs. That's not coincidence, that's memory. And maybe the jar remembers too. What if tonight, in your sleep, the fridge light flickers on again, and this time, the jar lid is loose? The room full of screams. It always starts the same. A door slams behind you, and you're locked inside. The room is narrow, windowless, and cold, lit only by a flickering bulb that seems to pulse in time with your heartbeat. But it's not the room that scares you. It's the sound, a chorus of screams, not one or two, but dozens, all around, all the time. They don't fade. They don't pause. They rise and fall like waves. Men, women, children, agonized, panicked, pleading. Sometimes whisper screams like someone begging through a gag. Sometimes full-throated howls of terror that rattle the walls. It's not random. You begin to realize they're not just noises, they're voices, and they're screaming for you. You try to wake. You do everything. Bite your tongue, clench your fists, even hurt yourself inside the dream, but nothing pulls you out. You're stuck. And no matter where you turn, the room doesn't end. The walls shift, the shadows stretch, and you begin to think maybe it isn't a room, maybe it's a memory, or worse, a warning. Night after night, the dream repeats. You tell no one. How do you explain something like that? How do you describe the feeling of your name being shrieked from unseen throats, or how the screams never echo properly? Like the room itself is swallowing the sound before it can leave? Then one day, it bleeds through. You're walking down the street. Just a normal afternoon. The sun is out. You pass a construction site, scaffolding, noise, and then you freeze because you hear them. The same screams. Not similar, identical. The pitch, the cadence, even the same shuddering breath between each cry. Your blood runs cold. You turn to look, but no one else reacts. No heads turn. No one stops working. It's like you're the only one who hears it. You stumble forward. You move closer to the edge of the site. The noise grows louder, not chaotic construction clamor, but layered voices in pain. And then, silence. Gone. Instantly. As if someone flipped a switch. You ask a worker what the noise was. They blink. Just drilling, they say. You know they're lying, or maybe they're not. Maybe they didn't hear what you did. Maybe only you can. That night, the dream doesn't wait for sleep. You lie in bed, eyes open, and the screaming starts. Soft at first, then louder. You scream back. Your partner wakes you, but you weren't asleep. You were wide awake. From that point on, the line is broken. You start hearing them in places where silence should reign, in elevators, behind closet doors, in your car radio when the station fades out, even in the gaps between words on the news. You see a therapist. They call it hypnagogic hallucinations. Trauma echoing through dream states. They tell you it's not real. But how do you explain the burn marks on your skin that match the places you touched in the dream? How do you explain the neighbor who knocked one morning, asking if everything was okay because she swore she heard screams from your apartment all night long? You start recording yourself. Cameras, microphones. Most nights, nothing. But sometimes, static. And layered beneath the hiss is something else, low, hidden. If you filter it, enhance the sound, you hear it. Faint but clear, your name, spoken in 30 different voices, begging you to listen. You dive into research. You learn about collective unconsciousness, shared dreamscapes, places where human emotion bleeds so powerfully into reality that it creates echoes, perceptual scars that ripple into other minds. You start reading about psychic imprints, rooms where tragedies occurred so violently that the suffering lingers like mold in the walls. And you start to think maybe the room isn't from your mind. Maybe it's real. Maybe you're just the next one who stumbled into its memory. You visit the construction site again. It's gone now, rebuilt. A luxury apartment complex. You ask about the foundation. One man hesitates. There used to be a hospital here, he says. Closed down in the 70s. Fire, I think. People died inside, screaming. The blood drains from your face. You ask for blueprints, for records. You find what you feared, a room in the old basement. No windows, one door, sealed from the inside. Never opened again. Your room. You never dream after that, not the way you used to, but you hear, always. In the walls. Beneath the hum of power lines, behind the silence of your own breath, because the room may be gone, but the screams never left. And neither did you. You begin to wonder, what if the screams aren't echoes of the past, but warnings from the future? What if they're not trapped souls, but versions of you? Lives you could have lived, choices you didn't make, realities you almost entered. And they're all calling out, trying to stop you from crossing some line you can't yet see. One night, in desperation, you try speaking back, not screaming, just answering, whispering into the dark. I hear you, you say. I'm listening. And for a moment, everything stops. The silence becomes so deep, it feels like sound itself recoils. Then a single word breaks through. Run. But from what? Or worse, to where? The sky that cracked. What if your ceiling wasn't cracked by time, but by a dream? It began with sleep, deep, consuming sleep, and then a dream, unlike any before. The world is dark, still. The sky pulses like it's alive, like it's breathing through some invisible wound. You look up. There's a moment of silence, of unnatural calm, and then it happens. The sky splits. Not a storm, not lightning. A crack, long, jagged, glowing, as if the dome of the world fractured, as if whatever held reality together had finally given way. You reach toward it, or maybe it reaches toward you. Then, darkness. You wake with a jolt, cold sweat, heart pounding. The dream was too real. You can still hear the sky breaking. You shake it off. Just another strange nightmare. But then, you glance up and freeze. There, on your ceiling, the same shape, the same branching line, a hairline fracture etched into the plaster in perfect imitation of your dream. It wasn't there yesterday. There's been no earthquake, no leak. You check the news, nothing. No thunder, no tremors, just a silent, unexplained crack, shaped exactly like the dream. This isn't a made-up horror story. This has happened. People from all over the world have described dreams in which the sky splits, sometimes revealing stars, sometimes fire, sometimes endless void. And afterward, they discover a matching pattern on their wall, their ceiling, their mirror, always in the same shape, always where they last looked before waking. Psychologists call this pareidolia, our tendency to see meaning in randomness, cracks on a wall that look like something familiar. But pareidolia can't explain how the crack wasn't there before. It doesn't explain the time-stamped photos people have showing blank, clean ceilings the day before the dream. It doesn't explain the matching symmetry, the echoes. One woman in Seoul dreamt the sky split open above her childhood home. The next morning, a crack appeared on her living room wall, in the exact place and shape. She hadn't dreamed of that room. She hadn't even thought about it. She only realized the connection after comparing photos. Another man in Texas woke to find a crack that mirrored the dream perfectly, traced right above where he'd lain sleeping, as if something had burned the image through reality itself. Some believe these dreams are more than imagination, that the sky cracking is symbolic of barriers breaking between worlds, between minds, between versions of self. And the physical cracks? They're not signs of damage. They're signs of intrusion. There's a theory, shared among physicists who dabble in fringe thought and spiritualists who speak of veils, that reality is layered, like glass stacked on glass, and sometimes pressure from one layer bleeds into another. What you dream, especially when emotionally charged, might not be confined to your mind. It might push into the world. Some call it imprinting. Others call it resonance. But the effect is always the same. A dream so intense, so real, that reality can't fully shut it out. And so it leaves a mark, not just a feeling, a physical scar, a memory made material. But why cracks? Because cracks represent something primal, instability, invasion, weakness. When something is too perfect, too sealed, the first sign of collapse is always the fracture. And if the sky represents our container, our illusion of safety, of limitlessness, then dreaming of it cracking is like glimpsing outside the simulation, a warning that something beyond comprehension is watching, and worse, entering. For some, the cracks multiply. They appear in mirrors, phone screens, car windshields, always shaped like the original, always after dreams of rupture. These people begin to keep journals, sketching the cracks, comparing angles. They become obsessed, because deep down, They're trying to answer a terrifying question. If a dream can leave a mark on the ceiling, what else can it change? Is the crack just the beginning? There are darker stories. One man claimed the crack on his ceiling grew wider every week. He covered it, painted it, but it kept returning. Until one day, he swore he saw light, just for a moment, shining through it. Light like the sky in his dream. Cold, white, and wrong. Another case told of a child who dreamed of the sky breaking and screamed herself awake. Her parents rushed in and found a crack above her crib, the exact shape of her finger-drawn sketch from the day before. She never went in that room again. They moved. The crack stayed. What if these cracks aren't damage, but doorways? What if dreaming of the sky breaking is the mind's way of perceiving a larger truth? That the container of this world is fragile, that something is trying to come through, or maybe something already has, and the cracks are the scar tissue from where it entered. You might think it's a coincidence. You might check your ceiling and see nothing, but the moment you dream it, if you ever do, look up when you wake. And if you see that shape, don't panic. Just remember, cracks don't appear without pressure. And sometimes, the pressure isn't coming from your side. The photo you never took. It was just a dream, until it wasn't. You remember it clearly. A dusty attic, light streaming in thin beams through cracks in the roof, the air thick with silence and the smell of wood and age. In the center of the room, an old box. You knelt beside it, lifted the lid, and there it was. A photograph, black and white, faded at the edges. 3 people stood in front of a small house, 2 adults and a boy. The boy had a red balloon. You don't know how you knew it was red. The photo had no color, but you knew. The dream was vivid. You could feel the grain of the wooden floor beneath your knees, the slight resistance as you turned the photo over. There were markings on the back, symbols you didn't recognize, but which stirred something ancient in you. When you woke, you remembered every detail, not like a fading dream, but like a real event, fixed in memory. For years, you remembered it. The posture of the man, his left hand resting stiffly on the woman's shoulder, the woman's hair curled just so, the boy's eyes staring too directly into the camera, the shape of the clouds above the roof. You never forgot. It haunted you, not like a nightmare, but like a warning. It didn't make sense. You had never seen these people in your life, and yet, you knew them. You even sketched the photo once, years later. Every detail matched the dream. You tried showing it to a friend. They laughed, said it was creepy, but interesting. You Googled image databases, reverse searched everything you could. Nothing. It was just a strange dream, just a false memory. Or so you told yourself. Until the day someone brought you the photo. It was a family gathering. Your cousin, twice removed, brought a box of old things from your great-aunt's attic. You weren't interested at first. You half listened as they passed around heirlooms, yellowed letters, baby shoes. Then someone said, "Look at this." You turned. Your blood froze. It was the photo. That photo. Exactly. The same house, the same 3 people, the same pose, the man's left hand, the woman's hair, the red balloon that wasn't red, the clouds, even the slight tear at the corner. You felt like vomiting. You asked, "Where did it come from?" They told you, "This is from the 1940s, before your mom was even born. We think it was your great-grandfather's neighbors or cousins. Not sure. No names written on the back." You didn't speak. You just stared. Everyone moved on. But you didn't. You held the photo in your hands and shook. It wasn't déjà vu. It wasn't memory. It was knowledge. You had seen it, years ago, in a dream, long before you ever knew this box of artifacts existed. The days after, you obsessed. You checked every detail again. You compared it to your old sketch. It matched, line for line. You questioned yourself. Did you see it before? Could it have been on a wall in childhood? On TV? But no. You were sure. You would have remembered. That dream had introduced it to you, not the other way around. So what was it? Some say time isn't linear. That memory can bleed both forward and backward. There's a theory called retrocausality, the idea that future events can influence the past. Maybe your subconscious reached forward in time, grasped a moment not yet known, and dragged it back into your sleep. Maybe your mind, untethered by waking limits, brushed against something it had no right to see. Or maybe it wasn't your dream at all. That thought chills you the most. What if the dream wasn't your own memory, but someone else's being shared, or worse, planted? What if, in that moment of sleep, something found you, handed you a piece of a puzzle from a life not your own, and waited for you to realize? And now you have. Now you wonder, how many of your memories aren't yours? How many dreams were not dreams, but messages? Images passed through time, or across minds. You remember things that never happened, places you've never been, conversations that leave an echo when you wake. You feel haunted not by spirits, but by evidence. Small proofs that reality isn't holding its shape. This photo was just one piece, but it was enough to crack the surface, and beneath it, something stirs. You haven't told anyone what you really saw, what happened after the photo in your dream. Because there was more. After you stared at it, in the attic, in that sleep space, you turned it over. There was writing, a sentence you couldn't read at the time, symbols, not words. But now, you keep seeing them, in graffiti, in dreams. Once, scrawled on a napkin you never wrote on, you traced them, compared them. They don't match any known language, but they feel like something you've always known. You can't translate them, but your bones understand. And they are telling you, this wasn't the last photo. There are more, waiting, somewhere in boxes you haven't opened, in thrift store bins, in antique shops. You'll stumble upon them, one by one, and each one will bring something else back. Not memory, not nostalgia, but truth. A truth that doesn't belong to this life. When you find them, your life will no longer belong to you, because the dreams weren't dreams. They were warnings. And now, the door has been opened. The breakup before it happened. It didn't feel like a dream. Not really. It felt like a preview, a cold, perfect rehearsal. You were sitting across from them in a place that didn't look like anywhere you'd been before, but you knew the feeling well, the tension in their jaw, the shift in their gaze, the ache in your chest before a single word was said. Then they spoke, calm, quiet, heavy. I don't think I love you anymore. I've felt this way for a while. I just didn't know how to say it. You woke up gasping, drenched in a sweat that chilled you deeper than the night air. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Those words echoed in your head all day, like a song lyric you couldn't stop humming. I don't think I love you anymore. The tone, the timing, the silence that followed, it all felt too precise, too rehearsed, like your heart had just been warned. You tried to forget it. Everyone has strange dreams. You told yourself not to be dramatic, but then little things began to shift. The way they responded slower to your texts, how they kissed you with just a little less pressure, how laughter between you stopped coming so easily. You wanted to ignore it, but every change felt like a confirmation. Your dream wasn't a message, it was a countdown. Then it happened. Days or maybe weeks later, you sat across from them again, this time in the waking world, and they said it, word for word. I don't think I love you anymore. I've felt this way for a while. I just didn't know how to say it. You didn't cry, not immediately, because in that moment, something inside you whispered, you already lived this. What do you do when your heart rehearses its own breaking? When the end doesn't surprise you because your subconscious beat reality to it? Some call it a self-fulfilling prophecy, that your fear created the outcome. But this was different. You didn't act on the dream. You didn't pull away. You tried harder, if anything. But it didn't matter, because the script was already written, and you were forced to watch it play out like déjà vu with a body count. Psychologists might say it's your brain processing subtle cues, intonations in their voice, shifts in body language, micro-rejections too small to notice consciously. Your dream, then, was just your brain assembling a puzzle your heart refused to see. But why word for word? Why the same pauses, the same exact phrasing? Maybe dreams are simulations, testing the emotional blast radius of a future event. Maybe your soul needed to survive it once in sleep before it could bear it awake. That's the thing people don't understand about heartbreak. It's not just the pain, it's the anticipation of pain, the knowing, the waiting, the way your body mourns before your mind catches up. Afterward, you couldn't help but replay the dream, not because it warned you, but because it comforted you. Somehow, it proved that the loss wasn't your fault, that something deeper had always known it would happen, that maybe your heart is more than just a muscle. It's a time traveler. It remembers endings before they begin. And then the questions come. Did you dream the breakup because it was inevitable? Or did it become inevitable because you dreamt it? Could you have stopped it if you'd forgotten the dream? Or did the dream force you to remember what you were too afraid to feel? This kind of precognition isn't rare. Thousands of people have reported eerily accurate breakup dreams just before their relationships ended. The same phrases, the same faces, the same crushing stillness. In one study, individuals who dreamt about being left often experienced increased emotional preparedness, like their psyche was bracing them for trauma. But that doesn't make it easier. It just sharpens the blade. And now, days later, you're caught in a strange loop. You remember the dream more vividly than the conversation. Your tears fell at the same second in both timelines. Your chest clenched the same way. It's like the pain wore two bodies, one asleep, one awake. And you don't know which one hurts more. But maybe, in a strange and cruel way, the dream was a gift, a warning, a soft landing before the fall, because something in you lived through it once already, and now you know you can survive, even when the words are the same, even when the script plays again. So now, when the silence grows heavy, when you sit alone in the room where they once were, remember, your heart tried to prepare you. It wasn't weakness, it wasn't madness, it was your soul stretching across timelines to protect you from the blow. And maybe, just maybe, it did. The twin you never had. What if your mind didn't invent them, just remembered? You dreamt of them for the first time on an ordinary night. It wasn't a strange dream. Not at first. You were with someone. They felt familiar, comforting, like a second heartbeat walking beside you. Same laugh, same voice, same scar on the wrist, one you never talk about. They weren't a stranger. They were your sibling, your twin. In the dream, you finished each other's sentences, shared memories you don't recall ever living. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt like reunion. You wake, the name still on your lips, the warmth still in your chest. A strange sadness follows, a sense of loss, of someone real, now gone. So you joke about it. Did I ever have a twin or something? You laugh at the dinner table, but your parents go quiet. They don't laugh. They look at each other, then at you. Pale, silent, the kind of silence that means something was buried a long time ago, and something, just now, unearthed it. Finally, one of them speaks. There was another. That's when the world shifts. They say it was during pregnancy. Complications. A second heartbeat that vanished. A shadow in an ultrasound that never became a person. You weren't supposed to know. They never told anyone. But you dreamed them. Perfectly. This is not rare. People across the globe have reported vivid dreams of siblings they never had, only to discover later there had once been another. A lost twin. A vanished fetus. A miscarriage unspoken. A secret kept to protect, forgotten over time. But the mind? The body? It remembers. This phenomenon is called vanishing twin syndrome. In some pregnancies, one twin is reabsorbed into the other during early development. The surviving child is born whole, but not alone, because something lingers. A pull, a gap, a ghost not made of spirit, but of almost matter. Science acknowledges the biology, but not the dreams. Those who dream of their vanished twin often describe an uncanny familiarity. They know details they were never told. like which side the twin occupied in the womb, or that they were identical. They even feel phantom memories, shared languages, imagined conversations, aches that feel like echoes of another body. In some cases, the surviving twin carries genetic material from the other, a faint second DNA signature in the blood, or traces of bone that weren't theirs. It's called chimerism, a life merged with another before it could be lived. But what if it's not just biological? What if the dreams are real encounters between you and the other version that never got to live? Not a ghost, not a hallucination, but a sibling trapped in a parallel branch of what should have been. Maybe they reach through dreams because that's the only place your timelines still touch. One woman dreamed for years of a sister who lived in a house she'd never seen. They laughed, sang songs, told secrets. Then she learned her mother had miscarried a daughter 6 months before she was born. The house? It matched an old family photo she'd never seen. Another man dreamt of a twin brother who died saving him from a fire. His mother later confessed there had been a fire, and there had been another child. Is it just coincidence? Collective subconscious? Or are our minds more attuned to lost connections than we realize? Children, especially, are sensitive to it. Many report imaginary friends who mirror them too well. Same voice, same habits. Sometimes they whisper secrets. Sometimes they say they'll be back. Parents dismiss it until years later the child sees a picture, an ultrasound, and says, "That's them." Grief leaves scars. But what about grief never shared? What happens when the loss was never acknowledged? When the surviving twin carries not just the body, but the memory? There are stories of people who feel incomplete, as if something is always missing, an empty chair beside them, a voice they expect to hear. Some grow up with a sense of being watched, protected. Others feel haunted by their own reflection, like it isn't entirely theirs. You may not believe in spiritual resonance or dimensional memory, but you can't deny the feeling, the ache, the recognition. And maybe that's why the dream came when it did. Not randomly, but when you were ready. Some say the veil between the living and the unborn isn't as thick as we think. That when grief is unspoken, when loss is unnamed, it creates a pocket of memory that doesn't fade. It floats, waiting for recognition, for reunion. And when the conditions are right, sleep, emotional vulnerability, a moment of subconscious openness, that twin, that echo, steps through. It explains why the dreams feel so real, why they don't fade like ordinary ones, why waking up feels like being torn from something vital. Because you are. Because some part of you always knew they were there, and some part of them never stopped reaching. There are ancient beliefs that every soul is born with a counterpart. In mystic traditions, twins were sacred, symbols of cosmic balance, yin and yang, day and night. And when one is lost, the other carries the weight of two. Maybe that's why so many who survive this kind of loss feel inexplicable pressure, a need to achieve, to live fully, as if they're carrying more than one lifetime. Some even say that certain talents, instincts, or sudden emotions, joy, fear, sorrow, aren't entirely theirs. They're borrowed from the one who didn't get to stay. The laughter you don't remember earning, the nightmares that feel older than you, all of it, shadows of a bond unbroken by birth. And what if those dreams aren't just messages? What if they're rehearsals, visits, preparations for a reunion you'll only understand after this life ends? What if, on your final day, the one waiting on the other side is not a stranger, but the twin you met in sleep? So ask yourself, was it just a dream, or was it a memory surfacing, a connection reactivating, a presence that never left? The truth may never be written in your family tree, but it might be written in your dreams. And every time you close your eyes, they might still be holding your hand, waiting, watching, whispering a truth you've always felt but never said out loud. You were never meant to be alone. The smile. Behind the curtain. It began like most dreams do, ordinary, meaningless. You were walking through a house. Not your house, but it felt familiar. The layout was strange. Endless hallways, too many doors, walls that pulsed faintly like breathing fabric. You wandered without fear, without urgency, until you saw the curtain. It was a heavy thing, velvet, deep burgundy, slightly damp to the touch. It hung in the middle of a hallway, not covering a window or a doorway, just suspended, as if trying to hide something that didn't want to be hidden. You felt it before you touched it. That pressure, that sense of something waiting, watching. You pulled the curtain and saw yourself. Not a mirror, not a reflection. It was you, standing just beyond the fabric, inside a small, dim room you hadn't entered. You didn't move, but the other you did. They smiled. Not a kind smile, not cruel either, just aware. The smile of someone who knew something you didn't, someone who had been waiting. You froze, tried to step back, but your feet wouldn't move. The dream held you still. Then the other you raised their hand and placed it against the other side of the curtain. Slowly, precisely, their palm against the velvet. You watched as your own hand, without command, lifted to meet it. Not because you wanted to, but because it had been decided. Your palms touched the fabric at the same time, and you woke up. But something was wrong. You staggered to the bathroom. The mirror felt off. It reflected everything correctly, but you felt backward, like your body had shifted, subtly, invisibly. You raised your left hand and watched your reflection do the same, but for a split second, you saw a delay, a hesitation, as if the mirror had to remember which side it was on. You tried to laugh it off, just a weird dream, just sleep fog. But it didn't go away. The feeling lingered. You avoided mirrors more. They made your skin crawl. Not because of what you saw, but because of what you might see if you looked too long. You began catching glimpses, not in glass, but in shadows, in windows, in the black mirror of your turned-off phone, smiles that appeared a split second too early, a blink that didn't match yours. And always, always, that faint velvet line, like a curtain edge, just barely visible in the corner of your eye. You tried telling someone once. They joked you were being haunted by yourself. But it didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like a copy, a twin, made without your permission. And it wasn't bound to your side of the world. There's an old idea in folklore that mirrors aren't reflections, but gateways. That what you see isn't truly you, but another version looking in. Most of us ignore that idea because it's easier to believe in glass than in possibility. But what if the curtain wasn't a symbol? What if it was a barrier? And what if you opened it? You did. You think back to that smile. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't malice. It was recognition. Like something ancient had been waiting behind the curtain, not to replace you, but to observe, maybe to influence, maybe to seep in through the cracks you left behind. You've started noticing changes. You speak a sentence and feel like it wasn't quite yours. You wake up in places you don't remember walking to. Sometimes your handwriting looks slightly unfamiliar. You chalk it up to fatigue, stress, but you know better. Your memories feel edited, trimmed, like chapters in a book you didn't write. You listen to recordings of yourself and hear pauses that don't feel natural. You spot old photos and feel uncertain. Was that your smile or its? Something reversed when you touched the curtain. Not fully, just enough. Enough for something to switch places, an exchange not of matter, but of presence. And now, the smile returns in your dreams, closer each time. You don't always see yourself anymore. Sometimes it's just the grin, suspended in black, a promise, a waiting. You've covered the mirrors in your home now, removed reflective surfaces, but it's not enough, because the reflection doesn't need glass. It needs memory. It needs familiarity. And every time you think of it, every time you feel that prickling sensation down your spine, you're calling it closer. Some say dreams are safe, a place to process. But what if that dream was a door? And what if you pulled it open? You didn't just see yourself, you let it in. And now, when you smile in photos, You study the curve of your lips too carefully because something about it doesn't feel like yours. And you wonder, is it watching through your eyes or are you watching through its? And if it is here now, where are you? You begin to suspect the answer is simple. You're still in that room, behind the curtain, smiling. You start to wonder, how long has it been since you felt fully alone inside your head? Since every smile, every gesture, every glance didn't feel slightly rehearsed? You catch yourself laughing at things that aren't funny, responding before people speak, anticipating emotions that were never yours. It's not possession, it's merging. You feel watched not from outside, but from within, like something nested in your thoughts is observing, mimicking, learning. The more you deny it, the more precise it becomes. A better version, a quieter one, patient, because it knows something you don't. The world outside the curtain wasn't real, but this side, this is its home, and you're the intruder. The book that told you. It began in a dream, quiet, surreal, and strangely lucid. You found yourself sitting at an old wooden table, worn smooth with age. A single lamp flickered above you, casting long shadows that danced across cracked walls. Before you lay a book. It wasn't ornate or bound in leather, just a plain hardback with no title. But you felt drawn to it, compelled. You opened it, and what you read changed everything. The words were specific, disturbingly so. It wasn't a story. It was a journal, your journal. Page after page described your life, events so minor and mundane you couldn't have imagined them, yet there they were. The coffee you would spill on Tuesday, the awkward joke your coworker would tell on Wednesday, the power outage on Thursday. You read with fascination, then disbelief, and finally dread. Because the details were so precise, they left no room for coincidence. You woke up shaken. You tried to brush it off. But then Tuesday came, and the coffee spilled. Not just coffee. The same cup, the same time, the same curse under your breath. On Wednesday, your coworker made that joke, word for word. On Thursday, the lights flickered out. You stood in the dark, your breath catching. The book was real, or at least the information was. But it had only been a dream, hadn't it? That night, you dreamt again. The same table, the same lamp. The book was still there, open to Friday. You didn't want to read it, but you did. You couldn't help yourself. And again, the events unfolded just as described. By Sunday, it wasn't just prediction. It was possession. The book wasn't just telling your story. It was writing it. You were no longer living. You were following. People talk about free will like it's a constant, but what happens when you already know what comes next? When you feel your actions aligning with words you haven't even read yet? That week was the most surreal of your life. You began to test the pages. You tried to change small things, ordering tea instead of coffee, going left instead of right. But somehow, events bent themselves to match the narrative. The tea ran out. The road was closed. Everything looped back to what the book said. And then came the final page. It was darker than the rest, smeared at the edges as if stained by something old. At the bottom, in that same chilling handwriting, were 5 words. One death before the end. No name, no detail, just inevitability. You slammed the book shut. You tried to wake up. This time, it didn't work. The dream held you longer. The book pulsed with heat. It felt alive. You screamed yourself awake, and for the first time in days, you didn't go back to sleep. But fear doesn't stop time. Monday arrived anyway, and with it, a new kind of dread. You watched everything, every car, every person, every cough, as if it might be the end. You stopped sleeping. You stopped reading. But still, the memories of the book haunted you. Every page etched into your mind, every outcome fixed in place. And then something even worse began to happen. You noticed the book in waking life, not physically, but mentally, like a phantom limb. You'd turn a corner and know what would happen next. You'd answer your phone and know what the voice would say. You weren't dreaming anymore, but the script was still running. And that final page, it loomed like a countdown. Was it your death or someone else's? Could stopping the dream prevent the end? Or did the very act of reading it plant the seed? You stopped sleeping for days, terrified that if you returned to the book, the story would continue. You were trapped, too afraid to read, too powerless to change what was already written. You tried to confide in someone, but how do you explain a book in a dream that controls real life? How do you convince someone that a nightmare predicted every moment of their week, down to the way a breeze carried the scent of rain? And worst of all, what if the dream wasn't a dream? What if it was a place, a library beyond time, where stories are cataloged before they unfold? What if the book wasn't predicting your life, but recording it in real time, like a mirror that writes as you move? The idea haunts you because now, even when you try to forget, you still feel it. The book, the page, the weight of inevitability. You stopped reading, yes, but the story hasn't stopped. The final words remain unwritten, waiting. And the death it promised? It could still be coming. Perhaps it already happened. Perhaps it's symbolic. Or perhaps you were never meant to escape. So now, when you drift toward sleep, you do so with clenched fists, willing yourself not to see that table, not to touch that cover, because one glance, one sentence more, and the story continues. And this time, you don't know how it ends. The whisper that changed you. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling. The whisper came late at night as you lay in bed, not asleep, but drifting. The space where thoughts blur into images and reality loosens its grip. That's when you heard it, your name, but not spoken in any language you recognized. The syllables were strange, fluid, yet it was unmistakably your name, somehow. Like the word itself reached into your bones, bypassed your ears, and settled in the marrow. The moment it touched you, everything inside you shifted. It wasn't loud, just a breath, a shape of sound that didn't make sense, but made meaning. You sat up, fully awake, heart pounding. You searched your room. The air was still, no one was there, but the moment lingered. The whisper echoed, not in sound, but in presence. Something had seen you and spoken to you, and now it wouldn't leave. The first dream came that night, a landscape you'd never seen, towering structures like bones reaching into a sky the color of bruises, symbols carved into the air itself, and voices, dozens of them, speaking in the same strange language, that same fluid alien cadence. You didn't understand the words, but you felt their meaning. It wasn't a conversation. It was a message buried in sound. You woke up breathless, and the dreams didn't stop. Every night more symbols, more phrases. You began waking with the sounds still in your mouth. Sometimes you'd find yourself repeating them without realizing it, half asleep, half possessed, a rhythm that didn't belong to you. Then came the moments during the day. You'd be alone, cooking, walking, brushing your teeth, and you'd hear it. A whisper, same language, always near, always soft, sometimes behind your shoulder, sometimes above your head. You turned every time. No one was ever there. That's when fear turned to obsession. You started writing the sounds down, phonetic scribbles in a notebook, drawing the symbols you saw in dreams. You researched ancient languages, dead scripts, lost dialects. Nothing matched. Nothing even came close. One linguist you emailed said the structure resembled no known language family, but the syntax seemed internally consistent. Another told you he'd seen similar patterns before, in transcripts from glossolalia, speaking in tongues, ritual trance states. But you weren't religious. You weren't in a trance. You were just changing. It wasn't just the dreams. Your thoughts began to feel different. Certain words in English stopped feeling natural. You struggled to express things you used to say easily, because now, in your head, the other words came first, the whispered ones. You stopped correcting yourself after a while. You stopped trying to push the language out. because deep down, you didn't want to. You wanted to know what it meant. One night, you recorded yourself sleeping. When you played the audio back, most of it was silent, but at 3:13 a.m., your voice began muttering, long strings of that strange language, and then, clearly, your name. But this time, it wasn't you saying it. It was something else. That was when you realized this might not be something your brain invented. This wasn't a psychological glitch or an elaborate dream loop. This was communication. From where? From what? You didn't know, but part of you felt honored. Another part felt claimed. There's a theory in cognitive science called linguistic relativity, the idea that language shapes perception, that the words we use determine what we're capable of understanding. If that's true, then a new language isn't just new sounds, it's a new worldview. So what happens when the language entering your mind wasn't born on Earth? What happens when its structure doesn't just describe the world, but alters your perception of it? You began noticing patterns in noise, whispers in fan sounds, refrigerator hums, static on old TVs, all forming into that rhythm, that language. It was like the universe was tuning itself to speak directly to you. You began seeing shapes in architecture that echoed the dream symbols. You started translating your thoughts into the other tongue before you even realized you were doing it. You were becoming fluent in something that no one else could hear. And then, one night, it spoke back. Not in a dream, not in your head, but aloud, in your room. You froze. You felt it. Taller than you, not quite in the same dimension, but unmistakably present. The whisper wrapped around you like wind laced with electricity. It said your name again, then said something new, a word that made your vision dim, a word that felt like fire and memory combined. And just as suddenly, it was gone. But the word stayed. And since then, you've changed. You feel people notice. Your voice sounds different to you now. Your handwriting shifts when you're not thinking. You forget your native words sometimes. You wake up with your eyes wet, not from tears, but from something older, like remembering a home you were never born in. Some nights you still whisper back. You don't know what you're saying, but it knows, and it listens. Because the whisper didn't just speak your name, it named you. The beach that took you. It was always the same beach, flat, gray, endless. The waves too quiet. You walked along its edge in dreams, where the sand felt like ash and the sea whispered things you couldn't quite make out. The sky was always overcast, as if the sun was waiting for something, and then the tide would shift. It would begin as a gentle pull, a lapping touch against your ankles, a rising swell that kissed your knees. But no matter how far you stepped back, it followed, climbing higher, grabbing harder, until it wasn't water at all. It was hands, cold, unseen fingers wrapping around your legs, your waist, your throat, pulling, dragging, and you couldn't scream, you couldn't breathe. The sky never changed, but the silence grew thick, dense, and then you'd wake, gasping, soaked in sweat, lungs burning as if you'd truly drowned. The dream returned every few nights. Sometimes it started earlier. The moment you stepped onto the beach, the pull would begin. Other times you'd be walking away, thinking you'd escaped, when the tide would suddenly race forward, snatching you back in a crashing flood. You stopped going near water. You ignored the ocean on vacations, laughed awkwardly when friends invited you to the beach. You told them you were allergic to sand. They never knew how true that felt. But one trip changed everything. It was meant to be a simple outing, a private cove, clear skies, laughter in the distance. You told yourself the dream had nothing to do with reality, that water couldn't remember, that the ocean couldn't hunt. You waded in, just past the shoreline. The water was warm, the waves gentle. You floated, breathed. Then the current shifted. It wasn't big, it wasn't loud, but your body knew. Your instincts flared. That same chill crawled up your spine like a whisper turned into pressure. You started paddling back, and that's when something wrapped around your ankle. You kicked, panicked. No seaweed, No rock, just pressure, tugging, harder. You called out, but the beach was distant, people too far to hear. Your legs thrashed. You felt it move, up to your calf, to your thigh. As if whatever was down there knew exactly how to drown you. You inhaled salt water. Your vision blurred. The waves swallowed the sky. And then, nothing. You woke on the sand, choking, vomiting seawater, people surrounding you. You got caught in a riptide, someone said. Lucky we saw you go under. But you knew better, because riptides don't whisper your name. They don't leave finger-shaped bruises, and they don't mirror your dreams. Since then, water has never felt the same. It hums when you get close, vibrates against your chest like recognition. Showers feel heavier. Rain carries a weight behind each drop. Even washing your hands can send a cold jolt through your spine. You've seen doctors. They found nothing. No nerve damage, no trauma they could locate. But you know better. You know that some part of the ocean remembers you. And worse, some part of you remembers it. You went back once, just to test the feeling. You stood at the edge of a different shore, a calm one. But the moment your feet touched wet sand, you felt it again. That tug, not on your body, but on your mind. A sense of inevitability, like a reunion already scripted, like returning to a place you never escaped. You started dreaming again, not just of drowning, but of being kept, held somewhere deep, buried in pressure and black water and silence that wasn't silence. You weren't dead. You were waiting. And now, you wake with salt on your lips, your clothes damp with no source, your ears ringing with the sound of waves, even in landlocked rooms. You tried to film it once, set up a camera while you slept. In the footage, your bed shifts, the air distorts, and for a full minute, your body lifts, as if being tugged upward or downward. And in the background, the faint sound of rushing water. You've stopped sleeping deeply. You keep lights on, stay inland. But you know it's only buying time, because the ocean doesn't need to be near to reach you. It's already inside you. It's in your pulse, your breath, your dreams. And the next time it pulls, you don't think it'll let go. Because the beach didn't try to drown you, it tried to take you. And it still might. You started reading about ancient myths, sirens, sea spirits, gods of the deep. But none of them matched, because what follows you isn't beautiful or wrathful. It's patient. It doesn't roar, it whispers. And its power isn't destruction, but memory. It makes you remember what it felt like to surrender, to go under not in fear, but in inevitability. You wonder how many others it has marked, how many people walk around with the ocean humming beneath their skin, waiting for the tide to call them back. You've passed strangers with eyes that linger too long on fountains, children who cry near pools without knowing why. Maybe the ocean doesn't just take, maybe it collects, and you're part of its collection now. The bed that isn't yours. What if you woke up, but never actually came back? It starts with something so simple, so quiet. You open your eyes. You're in your bed, your room. Everything looks right, familiar, almost. But then you notice something. The wall color feels off, just a few shades too pale. Your bedsheets are smoother than they should be. The light from the window hits differently. And your breath catches because the ceiling fan, it's spinning counterclockwise. It's never done that before. You tell yourself you're just groggy, maybe still half dreaming, but the feeling doesn't fade. It spreads. Your phone unlocks with the wrong thumb. Your lock screen is a photo you don't remember taking. Your pet, if you have one, won't come when you call. Or worse, they stare at you like you're a stranger. You go about your day. You eat. You shower. You talk to people. And yet, something's wrong. Everyone behaves normally, but they're just slightly off. A friend's voice is subtly deeper. Your partner hums a tune they've never liked. You see your reflection, and the mole under your eye is on the wrong side. Your handwriting isn't quite yours. You try to shake it off. But deep down, a cold certainty builds. This isn't your bed. This isn't your room. This isn't your world. This is a replacement. This is the bed that isn't yours. A phenomenon so eerily real, it's been reported for decades by people who swear they woke up in their home, but something about it had changed. Not drastically, not cartoonishly, but subtly. As if the version of reality they knew had been overwritten by another, almost identical, but undeniably wrong. Some describe it like sleepwalking into another timeline. Others say it feels like a dream that never ended, where you woke up in the dream's copy of your life and no one noticed the switch. Psychologists refer to this sensation as derealization, a dissociative state where the world feels unreal. But that doesn't explain the physical discrepancies, why keys are in the wrong place, why photos show events that never happened, or why objects you clearly remember owning have been replaced with versions that look newer or older. One woman in Finland reported waking up to find her bookshelves perfectly organized, something she had never done. Every book was alphabetized. She assumed her partner had done it until she asked him, and he looked confused, said he hadn't touched them. But what chilled her most? One book she knew she'd lost years ago, one she grieved over, was now sitting on the top shelf, mint condition, with her handwriting inside. Another man claimed he returned from a short nap and found his entire apartment mirrored. His kitchen was on the wrong side. His photos were reversed. Even his birthmark had shifted. He thought he was having a breakdown, until he met his neighbor in the hallway and she said, "Did you rearrange everything overnight? Weird. I swore your place was different yesterday." So what is it? A glitch? A bleed-through? A transition? Some theorists believe reality is constantly shifting between possible states, and dreams act as portals. If you drift too deep, if your mind moves through the wrong layer, you may not wake up in the same version you left. Because facts don't tell the future, but your dreams might. You've stopped booking things too far ahead. You wait for the dreams. Sometimes they don't come, and that scares you more, because then you're blind. You've started journaling every detail, the background noise, the license plate in the dream's parking lot, the clock frozen at a certain time. Everything could matter. Everything might be the clue that saves you. People call you paranoid now. Some think you're lying. Others are fascinated, asking for readings before their own flights. You refuse, because it's not a gift. It's not something you control. It's a curse that only works when you're the one at risk. And now, the worst part, you've started dreaming of other people, friends, family, strangers. But when you warn them, they don't believe you. They go anyway. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes something does. You've lost people who laughed it off. You wonder if this is your new purpose, to keep walking the razor's edge between what's real and what's possible. To live with one foot in the waking world and the other in the one where warnings bloom like scars. Every night before a trip, you dream. Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes it's nonsense, symbols, numbers, static voices, but always a message hidden underneath. And when the dream is quiet, you worry most. Because silence doesn't mean safety. It means you're not being warned this time. It means whatever's coming doesn't want you to escape. So you stay grounded. And wait, because one day you won't dream. And that's the day you'll know. This time, you're going. And still, you wonder, why you? Why are you given these glimpses and not the power to change more than your own fate? Why are you allowed to dodge death only to live in fear of dreaming? There's no peace in surviving like this. Only anticipation. Only the quiet terror of tomorrow. You've become a pattern seeker. You listen to static. You analyze dream fragments like they're classified intelligence. You stare too long at flight numbers, hotel room keys, names that echo in your sleep. The world has become a message board written in invisible ink, and you are the unlucky reader cursed to see it light up at night. You no longer feel lucky. You feel chosen, and not in the way anyone wants to be. Because one day, the dream won't come in time. Or worse, it'll come clearly, and you'll be forced to go anyway, trapped by duty, or love, or coincidence. And when that moment arrives, you'll recognize the sound of metal screaming through the clouds. You'll know the shape of it, the pull of gravity, the red balloon, the stuffed bear. The moment will already belong to you because you've lived it once, in sleep. And now, it's awake. The X-ray you remember. You didn't ask for the dream. It just arrived, uninvited, vivid, and wrong. You were lying on a cold table, bathed in blue light. The air buzzed like static. Around you, invisible machines clicked and hummed. And then came the image. Your own bones. Not just ordinary X-rays, but surreal, impossible. Your ribcage spiraling like a nautilus shell. Your spine bending in unnatural arcs. Limbs misaligned, twisted into forms no human should survive. But you were awake in the dream, watching, breathing, and somehow not surprised. You woke shaking, not from fear, but familiarity, like the dream had shown you something you already knew but refused to see. For days afterward, your body felt heavier, like the bones inside you were suddenly louder, present in every motion. You began to feel subtle aches, phantom tugs behind your shoulder, a dull pulse in your lower back, tiny cracks when you moved just so. Nothing alarming, nothing new, but somehow newly meaningful. You told yourself it was just your subconscious being dramatic. Maybe your body had tensed in sleep. Maybe you'd seen something online and absorbed it. That's what dreams are, right? Emotional metaphors. Brains making noise. But then, the pain became persistent. Not intense, just enough to justify concern. A sharp pull in your hip when climbing stairs. A nerve fire ripple across your shoulder blade. You went to a doctor. Routine check. Nothing urgent. Until they ran the scan. The technician was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that fills a room with static. They took longer than usual, eyes narrowing at the monitor. "We're going to take one more, just to be sure," they said. You nodded, heartbeat beginning to rise. When they showed you the image, your breath caught. It was the dream. The same twisted patterns. Your bones. Their shape. Their bend. Identical to what you had seen in sleep. Not close. Not similar. Exact. You sat there in disbelief, staring at the contours of a body you thought you knew. The doctor said it was congenital, a rare skeletal condition, something you'd been born with, but which had never caused enough disruption to be noticed until now, a hidden architecture you'd carried your entire life, silently, invisibly. Except, not invisibly, not to your dreaming mind. That's when the questions began to eat at you. How did you know? How did your subconscious construct a medically accurate image of your own skeletal system, deformed in a way you'd never seen, never studied, never even suspected? Some would call it coincidence, a lucky guess, a subconscious detection of physical imbalance, but the precision was too sharp, too specific, right down to the unnatural curve of your third rib. It wasn't symbolic. It was anatomical. There's a name for this in psychology: somatic dreaming. The idea that your body can speak through dreams, transmitting distress signals in symbolic form. But this wasn't symbolism. This was a blueprint, a diagnosis you received before waking. And no science, no sleep study, can fully explain how a dream can replicate internal structures hidden beneath skin and memory. Some believe the body holds intelligence far beyond conscious awareness. That organs, tissues, even bones carry signals the mind can't decipher, except during sleep. In that quiet space where the brain untethers from narrative and the ego dissolves, truth can slip through, not in metaphor, in revelation. And what if it goes deeper? What if your body remembers more than your life? What if those shapes, those distortions, aren't just yours? What if they're ancestral? Encoded echoes of someone who came before you, passed down not in DNA, but in form. There are ancient beliefs that say bones carry the stories of those who bore them, that your structure holds a lineage of pain, of survival, of design. But no belief can prepare you for what it feels like to be proven right by a dream. You walk differently now, not with fear, but with a strange reverence. Every time your shoulder twinges, you think of that dream. Every movement feels like a conversation with something older than thought. You are not just flesh over bone. You are story in structure, mystery in marrow. You didn't dream of the future. You remembered the truth before anyone else could see it. And now, every time you pass a mirror, you wonder, what else is hidden beneath the surface? What else is waiting to be remembered, not by science, not by accident, but by the part of you that never forgets? The Garden of Regret. It began in a dream so vivid, you remembered the scent of soil when you woke. You were standing in a garden, a place you'd never seen, yet it felt achingly familiar. The trees bowed inward, as if keeping a secret. The wind didn't move, and the plants were wrong. They weren't flowers, they weren't vegetables, they were heads, human heads, buried up to the neck, eyes closed, skin pale like wax. Their faces were people you knew, your childhood friend, a teacher, your sibling, your mother, each one nestled gently in the ground, surrounded by vines and moss, peaceful, untouched. You didn't scream, you didn't run. In the dream, this seemed normal. You wandered the rows slowly, unsure what you were supposed to do, until you saw it, your own face, buried like the rest. But its eyes were open, watching. And then a voice, neither spoken nor heard, pressed into your mind like a weight. It whispered, "Choose." You didn't want to, but your dream hand reached out, trembling, and gripped a stalk. You pulled. The face groaned, and as the roots tore from the soil, you woke, sweating, shaking, a scream dying in your throat. You tried to forget it. You told yourself it was just a dream, but that morning, your phone buzzed. A message. Someone close to you, one of the faces in the garden, was in the hospital. Sudden illness. No explanation. And your hand, the one that pulled the plant, still ached. Coincidence. That's what you told yourself. Until it happened again. Few weeks later, the garden returned. New rows. More faces. Some you loved. Some you barely remembered. Again, the whisper. Choose. And again, you resisted. But this time, your foot brushed a stalk by accident. It bent. And that night, someone else fell sick. Not dead, but touched, dimmed, like their light had flickered low. You stopped sleeping deeply. You drank coffee at midnight, sat in chairs that faced away from anything green. You avoided naps. You feared rest, because the garden was waiting. And then, it stopped. No more dreams. You should have been relieved, but instead, you felt watched. You began to notice plants in real life, potted ones in offices, vines on fences, even dandelions in the cracks of sidewalks, and felt a chill, a pressure in your chest, a weight in your throat, as if something was checking, waiting to see if you would pull again. You no longer trust gardens. There's a real psychological phenomenon known as somatic misattribution. When the body feels guilt, it can't explain. It creates physical symptoms. But that doesn't account for the timing, the accuracy, the cause and effect. Every time you dreamed, someone suffered. Maybe it was a metaphor. Maybe the dream was showing you how fragile connection is, how easily we disturb the roots of others. But why did the faces keep changing? Why were there people buried in your dream that you hadn't thought of in years? And worst of all, why was your own face always there, always waiting? There are cultures that believe illness can be dream-born, that to harm someone in a dream is to harm their spirit in the waking world. Shamans speak of gardens of memory, fields where the soul walks to prune its regrets. But what if your dream wasn't metaphor? What if it was a real place, a dimension of consequence, where every tug, every hesitation rewrites something? What if the faces weren't images, but proxies, portals to the real people? And when you pulled, you severed something that held them in balance? And what if you weren't supposed to stop dreaming? What if you were meant to finish? You don't dream anymore, not of the garden, but the guilt remains. Every time someone you know grows pale, distant, or unwell, you wonder, did I touch them? Did I bend a leaf by accident? You've stopped tending houseplants. You ignore bouquets. You walk faster past trees that lean inward. Because sometimes you swear you can see faces in the bark. Sometimes you feel the soil tremble under your shoes. And sometimes, just sometimes, you feel something tugging at you. Not your body, your roots. And late at night, when sleep starts to pull you under again, you hear it. A whisper beneath the surface of thought. Choose. You tried therapy. You tried rationality. They told you dreams were symbolic, grief expressing itself, guilt looking for a stage. But you never told them everything. You never mentioned that you started seeing withered petals fall from healthy plants the moment you touched them, or how your cat refused to sit on your lap if you'd been near soil that day. You didn't tell them that once. You whispered, "I'm sorry," to a sunflower, and it bloomed overnight, then died just as fast. You began avoiding eye contact in photos, scared to recognize any new face that might later appear half buried in dream soil. You turned down invitations, disconnected, because the fewer people you love, the fewer that can be taken. And that's when you started seeing the new faces, strangers, people you hadn't met yet, buried in rows, humming softly as if dreaming themselves, waiting for you. And that's when you knew. The garden was growing. The silence in your sleep isn't peace, it's preparation. Every night without the dream, something spreads deeper. You feel it in your lungs when you breathe in too close to the ivy. You see it in the sidewalk cracks shaped like mouths. The garden hasn't left. It's remembering you. And one day soon, it will bloom again. And when it does, it will not whisper, "Choose." It will simply call your name. The wind that said goodbye. What if the last goodbye didn't come in words, but in wind? It started as a dream. You were standing somewhere open, on a hill, by the sea, or a street that never existed. Everything was quiet, but not empty. The wind moved like breath, threading through leaves, brushing your skin like memory. You turned your head and listened, and in the swirl of breeze, you heard it, your friend's name, not shouted, not spoken, whispered, as if the world itself was exhaling them. You woke up confused, disoriented. The feeling stayed with you like a haunting fog. And then the phone rang. They were gone. That's when everything froze. Not because of the call, but because you already knew. The wind told you, before anyone else, before it should have been possible. You try to make sense of it. You search for logic. Maybe you had a bad feeling for days. Maybe you sensed something was off. But you didn't. You were fine. They were fine. And yet, on that windy night, their name reached you through a current of air that had no voice, no reason, no business knowing anything at all. This is the wind that said goodbye, and it's more common than you think. All over the world, people have reported dreams or moments before a loss, where something invisible passed by. A feeling, a whisper, a sudden wind through a closed room, not cold, not warm, just present. And in it, a message not meant for the ears but for the soul. One last echo before the silence. Psychologists might call it coincidence, grief retroactively constructing meaning. But those who've lived it say otherwise, because it wasn't just a feeling. It was specific. It was a name, a date, a presence. One woman in Ireland woke to wind chimes ringing furiously, despite no storm. The name of her childhood friend danced through her dream like a lullaby she hadn't heard in decades. She called her family the next morning, only to learn her friend had died in her sleep that night. A man in South Africa dreamed of sitting beside a lake, and wind kept circling behind him. It kept calling his brother's name, low and slow. He brushed it off until the call came. Car crash. Instant. He hadn't spoken to his brother in months, had no reason to feel anything. But the wind, it knew. So what is it? Some believe wind carries energy. That air, like water, records and transmits vibration. that the breath of the world sometimes carries more than temperature and scent. It carries memory, farewells, the final fragments of a soul that, before crossing over, tries to return home one last time. There are cultures that believe the wind is sacred, that when someone dies, their spirit becomes part of the air, roaming, touching, saying goodbye. Not to everyone, just to those who would feel it, who would listen. And after that first dream, it never really stops, does it? Every windy night, you think of them. You stand outside and the breeze brushes your face just right, and for a second, it's them. You don't question it anymore. You don't rationalize. Just let it happen. And sometimes, it's stronger. The curtains move when there's no draft. The candles flicker without cause. Their favorite song comes on the radio when the trees are swaying. The wind knocks something off the shelf, and somehow, it's something they gave you. You whisper back, maybe just a word, maybe nothing at all, but you know they're there, just for a moment, just long enough. And maybe that's what this is, not a ghost, not a haunting, but a promise, that some goodbyes are too big to stay buried. That love, when released into the world, doesn't vanish. It transforms, it moves, it rides the wind. In Japan, they speak of the last breath wind, a breeze that visits the living from the moment the spirit leaves the body. In Native American traditions, wind is often viewed as the voice of the ancestors, moving between worlds to deliver messages when words fail. In Celtic myth, the wind is a soul's chariot, carrying the departed through the veil. Around the world, the idea is the same. The wind is more than weather, it's memory, in motion. And when you've felt it, truly felt it, no amount of science can unfeel it. You don't tell many people, maybe no one, because how do you explain that you knew they were gone before anyone said a word, that you didn't hear it from a person, but from the trees, the wind against your window, the way your room suddenly smelled like their jacket, or their old cologne, or nothing at all, but somehow everything. And you've tried to dismiss it. You've told yourself it was grief playing tricks, but the timing is always too exact, the feeling too real, the whisper too clear, and over time, you stop denying it. You start waiting for it. You begin to understand that not all goodbyes happen on time. Some are delayed, some arrive wrapped in silence and wind, and some are reminders that even death cannot erase the connection between two souls once intertwined. So now, every time a strong breeze rattles your windows, every time the trees lean and shift, every time the world grows quiet just before a gust, you pause, because you know they've returned. For a moment, for a breath, for one last drift through the world that held them, and maybe, on some other windy night, your name will be whispered too, and someone will listen, and remember, and believe. It started with a dream. You stood in a void, no floor, no ceiling, just endless space. In your hand, a coin, simple, ordinary, familiar. You flipped it into the air and watched it rise, spinning in slow, perfect silence. You waited for it to fall, but it didn't. It just kept turning, suspended in the void, reflecting nothing, touching nothing. You reached for it, but it stayed just out of reach, spinning like time itself had stopped caring about gravity. You woke up breathless, not in fear, but in frustration. Something about the coin stuck with you, the way it never landed, the way your choice remained suspended. It didn't seem like a dream, it felt like a warning, or maybe a curse. And then, life began to change. Or rather, it didn't. You were offered a job you couldn't decide on. You stayed in a relationship that felt like it might already be ending. You moved into an apartment you weren't sure you liked. Big choices, but every decision felt unfinished, like no matter what you picked, you hadn't really chosen. You kept waiting for something to feel resolved, for a feeling of yes or no. But instead, every decision seemed to split you in two. That's when you remembered the coin, and suddenly it all made sense. You never stopped flipping it. You've been in free fall ever since. Every major moment since that dream has carried a strange weightlessness, like your life is being lived in limbo. You finish conversations unsure of what you agreed to. You look at your reflection and don't know if you're proud of the person staring back. You say yes and feel no in your chest. You say no and feel regret before the echo fades. You are always mid-sentence, mid-thought, mid-decision. Some would call it indecisiveness. But this is different. This is existential suspension. You don't doubt your decisions. You don't even feel them because you're still waiting for the coin to land, waiting for that internal thud of certainty, the closure that never comes. And it's bleeding into everything. You try on clothes, but don't know what suits you. You revisit old memories and can't decide which version was true. You hesitate before speaking, not from fear, but from dislocation, like you've slipped 1 degree out of phase with yourself. Psychologists might call it decision fatigue. But how do you explain the fact that you can feel the coin still spinning? That it appears in your mind during critical moments? That sometimes, when you're still, you swear you can hear it? The faint metallic whir just outside conscious hearing, and you begin to wonder, what would have happened if it had landed? If the dream had ended with heads or tails, would your life have moved forward cleanly? Would you have become someone definite rather than this half shadow pacing through corridors of maybe? There's a theory in quantum physics, superposition, that particles exist in all states until observed, that choices exist simultaneously until one is chosen. That's what your life feels like now, like you're Schrodinger's human, both fulfilled and unfulfilled, both committed and unsure, not because you want to be, but because something never collapsed into certainty. You start to retrace your steps. When did you stop choosing? When did everything become potential instead of reality? Was it the dream or something deeper? You look at old photos and barely recognize the person in them, not because you've changed, but because that version of you had decided. They wore clothes they chose. They held people they loved or left. They weren't perfect, but they were solid. You are vapor. You are pending. The scariest part is this: you've gotten used to it. You've learned to live without answers, to float instead of stand, to drift instead of walk. And sometimes that feels like peace, but mostly it feels like delay, like you've put yourself on pause, waiting for the universe to tell you which path to take, when maybe the universe is just waiting for you to land. But how do you stop a coin that won't fall? How do you ground a decision that was never made? You can't reach into that dream and grab it. You can't rewind the moment. All you can do now is decide anyway, without the fall, without the answer. Just pick, commit, anchor. Because maybe that's the truth. The coin isn't going to land until you stop watching. And maybe it's never really been about what side it falls on. Maybe it's always been about choosing, even when you don't know the outcome. And maybe, just maybe, if you close your eyes and step forward, you'll finally feel the coin hit the earth. The doll that bled. It started with a dream. You were in a child's bedroom, but not yours. The wallpaper was yellowed, curling at the corners. A music box played off-tune in the distance. You didn't recognize the house. You didn't recognize the furniture. But the doll on the shelf, you knew it. Porcelain, delicate, face cracked, just beneath one glass eye. Its dress was old-fashioned, dusty rose with lace trim. But what struck you was the blood. Thick, dark streaks leaking from its eyes, trailing down its cheeks. And it stared at you. Not with menace, not with sorrow, just presence. A silent accusation. You woke before it moved, but the image clung to you. You tried to shake it. Dreams don't mean anything, right? Then, 2 weeks later, you found it. Same size, same crack, same faded pink dress, sitting on a shelf at a thrift store downtown. You stopped in your tracks. Your mouth went dry. You picked it up and turned it over. No tag, no maker's mark. Just a smear on its porcelain cheek, faded but unmistakable. The stain was red. You set it down. You walked out of the store. You didn't tell anyone. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 days later, it appeared again. This time in your apartment, sitting upright in the corner of your bookshelf. You told yourself someone was playing a prank, maybe a friend who knew your dream, even though you never shared it. You checked your locks, your windows, nothing broken, nothing moved. Just that doll, sitting, watching. You threw it out. You didn't just toss it in the trash. You wrapped it in a pillowcase, tied it tight, buried it in the outside dumpster under 3 bags of garbage. It didn't matter. It came back. On your desk. The red stain darker now. Almost fresh. You stopped sleeping. You started hearing music in your dreams, the same warped lullaby. Each night, the doll grew closer. Not walking, not crawling, just appearing. At the foot of your bed, on your chest, breathing. But dolls don't breathe. There's a term in psychology, the uncanny valley. It's the discomfort we feel when something is almost human, but not quite. But this wasn't discomfort. This was dread. This was the sense that something was using the doll, like a mask, a doorway. You took it to a priest. He wouldn't touch it, just told you to burn it. You tried. It screamed. The fire went out. No one believed you. Of course not. You don't even believe yourself sometimes, but you kept waking with scratches on your arms, cold spots in your room, and always the doll, waiting. There are stories you learned, legends, of vessels, dolls, mirrors, jewelry, used to contain pain, grief, rage. Someone, somewhere may have poured their sorrow into that doll like water into a jar. And it spilled into you the moment you dreamed of it. But why you? Some say we become targets when we notice things we shouldn't. That dreams are invitations. That when you saw the bleeding doll in your sleep, you looked too long, and it noticed. Now you can't make it stop. You've tried everything. Salt lines, prayers, leaving your home. It always finds its way back. You stopped seeing your friends, stopped dating. People ask what's wrong, but how do you say, "There's a doll in my house that cries blood and follows me when I dream"? You checked hospital records, accident reports, obituaries, anything that might explain who it was before it became this. But nothing matches. Maybe the doll isn't haunted by a person. Maybe it is the person. A soul cracked into porcelain. And maybe it doesn't want release. Maybe it wants company. Now, you hear it at night. Not just the lullaby, but breathing, faint, behind your door. And when you open it, there's nothing but silence. And the doll. You thought of burying it far away. You drove for hours once, into the woods, dug a hole and whispered an apology you didn't understand. You didn't even look back when you drove away. It was back before morning. You can't get rid of it. You can only acknowledge it. You can only endure it. And the worst part? You've started dreaming again. Only now, you're in the doll's house. You recognize the wallpaper. You recognize the furniture. And the doll? It looks like you. You've started noticing it in other places now. Not the doll itself, but pieces of it. A shard of porcelain behind your couch. A scrap of dusty rose fabric tangled in the corner of your laundry. A tiny footprint on the window pane. As if it's not just moving, it's multiplying, infiltrating the edges of your reality, like a stain bleeding through the seams of the world. And it's not just you anymore. Your neighbor says her dog won't stop barking at her closet. Your coworker mentioned a music box tune stuck in her head, one she swears she never knew. Strangers brush past you on the street and shiver, like something cold clings to your skin. You haven't touched the doll in weeks, but it touches you. Sometimes in dreams you see through its eyes. You feel yourself being lifted, carried, buried. You wake up with dirt beneath your nails and can't explain how it got there. You tell yourself sleepwalking, stress. But deep down, you know the truth. It's not following you anymore. It's with you. It's part of you. And when you look in the mirror now, your eyes don't always look like your own. One of them catches the light wrong, too shiny, too still. You rub at it. Nothing changes. And the worst part isn't the dreams. It's that you're starting to understand them. The doll never wanted to scare you, it just wanted to be remembered. And now, you always will. The wound without cause, it came without warning. One night you were asleep, peaceful, dreamless, and then suddenly you weren't. You were somewhere dark, silent. Not like night, but like space with no stars. The kind of dark that presses against your lungs. You couldn't see the ground, couldn't tell if you were standing or floating. And then something changed. A sound, a rush of wind that had no source. And then a pain so sharp it wasn't pain at all. It was invasion. A presence entering through your chest like a blade that didn't cut, but sank, as if claiming territory. You couldn't scream, couldn't move. You felt yourself buckle inside, felt your heart stutter, and then you woke up, sitting upright, breathless, your shirt soaked in sweat. The memory so vivid it felt real, like you'd actually been stabbed. But there was no wound, no blood, just a bruise centered directly over your heart, deep purple, ringed in yellow, like a fist had been pressed there for hours, or something had tried to dig its way through. You examined yourself in the mirror, touched the mark, flinched. The pain was real. It throbbed for days. You told no one. What could you say? That you were attacked in a dream? That you bled in a world with no light? That a wound without a weapon followed you into the waking world? You tried to forget. You blamed it on sleep position, on nightmares, on a fall you couldn't remember. But deep down, your body knew. It flinched at shadows. Your heart skipped when silence grew too deep. And at night, the dreams returned. Not the stabbing, but the feeling of being watched, of something circling you, something waiting for the right moment. You started sleeping with lights on, music playing, but nothing blocked it out. Some nights you woke gasping, heart racing, chest tight, only to find the bruise darker, angrier, expanding. You visited a doctor. They found nothing. No trauma, no break, no internal bleeding. Psychosomatic, they called it. Stress, anxiety. But how do you explain the precise location, the way it pulses in time with your fear, the way mirrors fog when you pass even when the room is cold? You began to research. Ancient dreams, sleep wounds, cultures that believe dreams can scar. In some stories, the soul leaves the body at night, and if something finds it vulnerable, it can leave a mark. A sign that you were touched, claimed, changed. You found others. Quiet blog posts, archived forums, people describing the same experience, the silent darkness, the wound, the lasting bruise. Some of them faded, others didn't. One entry ended with a line you can't forget. If the bruise turns black, you're running out of time. You checked yours that night. It was almost black. You didn't sleep. The next day, it was lighter, and you realized something terrifying. It fed on dreams, on sleep. When you denied it access, it faded. But the cost was high. You began to lose time, forget things. Your reflection looked older, thinner, like it was decaying by the minute. But you refused to sleep because you remembered what waited in the dark. Until one night, you couldn't help it. You passed out, and there it was again. But this time, it wasn't silent. It spoke, not in words, but in feeling. It didn't want to kill you. It wanted to live through you, to borrow your heartbeat, to wear your breath like clothing, to make you its anchor in this world. And when you woke, the bruise was gone. At first, you celebrated. But then you noticed other things, flickers in your vision, your shadow bending the wrong way, a pulse in your ears that never quite matched your heart. You smiled at strangers and they stepped back. You spoke and dogs barked. You dreamed, but not as yourself. You were watching now, from behind your own eyes, because maybe the stab wasn't to hurt you, maybe it was to make room. And now, the thing that marked you has moved in, not with violence, but with patience, not possession, occupation. And every time your chest tightens with fear, every time your pulse stumbles, you remember the bruise, the weight, the blade without a shape. And you wonder, how much of you is still you? And how much of you is it? You started writing things down, phrases you didn't recognize, symbols that came to you in dreams. At first, they meant nothing, but over time, they began to repeat, the same shapes, the same loops, like something carving itself into your subconscious, one whisper at a time. One morning, you found your hand moving before you were awake, scribbling the symbol into the condensation on your mirror. You stared at it for hours, unable to wipe it clean. And then the mirror cracked, right down the center of the mark. You're not sure what lives inside you now, but you know it watches, it learns, it waits. And it's not done with you yet. Every heartbeat feels borrowed, every breath a negotiation. You've stopped asking if you're alone in your own body. The answer is clear each time you speak and hear a second silence beneath your voice. You've become a host, a haunted echo of yourself. And the worst part? You're starting to forget who you were before the wound, because whatever pierced you didn't just enter your chest, it opened a door. And something walked through. The room. You never left. What if the dream wasn't something you escaped, but something you never left? It starts quietly, like many dreams do. A shift in scenery, a hallway too narrow, a door you don't remember opening. You step inside, and suddenly you're in a padded room. Soft white walls, no windows, just the distant hum of silence. There's no sound, no clock, no voice, just the overwhelming sense that you're being watched, and that you are not supposed to be here. You wake up. Your heart is racing. The dream lingers like a shadow that refuses to dissolve. But you're in your bed, right? Home. Safe. Except your ribs ache. There's a strange bruise on your shoulder, and your palms sting as if you've clawed at something. You tell yourself it's just a dream. But then, the door creaks closed behind you, and your whole body freezes. Just for a second. Just long enough to wonder if you ever truly left that room. This is The Room You Never Left, a real experience reported by hundreds of people across cultures. It's the unsettling phenomenon of waking from a dream, usually involving confinement, isolation, or observation, only to carry the physical and emotional residue into waking life. Not metaphorically, literally. Bruises, scratches, panic, trauma, all born from a place the conscious mind insists never existed. Psychologists and sleep researchers call this phenomenon a carryover event. In extreme cases, people experience somatic symptoms, real bodily responses triggered by imagined scenarios. But this explanation only goes so far. Because what do we call it when a person has never been in a padded room, never suffered trauma, never experienced restraint or abuse, yet wakes from a single dream showing signs of all three? A man in Ohio dreamed of being locked in a white cell. In the dream, faceless figures monitored him through a panel in the wall. He screamed, pounded the padding, and when he awoke, his knuckles were raw, not metaphorically, bleeding. He swore he hadn't moved in his sleep. Another woman from Berlin dreamt she was sedated and restrained on a hospital gurney. She woke up unable to move for nearly 10 minutes. Her muscles ached as if she had been fighting something all night. These dreams aren't isolated. They often recur. The same room, the same sequence. A feeling of being tested, observed, or punished for something you can't remember doing. Some even report seeing the same symbols, like clocks that melt or doors without handles. Strangely, others have claimed they saw themselves in the corner, already in the room, watching. There's a theory, unofficial but persistent among fringe psychologists and dream researchers, that these padded room dreams represent something deeper than trauma, that they might be memories, not from this life, but from another version of ourselves. A self that broke down, a self that was locked away, a self that still exists, trapped somewhere, trying to scream through the veil of dreams. Some connect this to the theory of dream bleed, when memories, emotions, or traumas from alternate timelines leak into our consciousness through dreams. If true, The padded room may not be symbolic. It might be literal, a fragment from a version of reality where you were institutionalized, silenced, restrained, not in your current life, but in one that almost was. But it's not just the physical symptoms that make this phenomenon disturbing, it's what it does to your perception of safety. After that dream, closed doors make your chest tighten. White walls feel like threats. You hesitate before entering narrow spaces. And sleep, something once comforting, becomes a gamble. Will you wake refreshed, or wake shaken with claw marks on your arms and the whisper of your own voice screaming from nowhere? Science tries to explain it with parasomnia, disorders like sleepwalking or REM sleep behavior disorder. During these states, people can move, act out dreams, or even harm themselves unconsciously. But for those who experience the room you never left, there's no sign of movement during sleep, no thrashing, no sleepwalking, just a silent, paralyzed body and a mind that went somewhere else. Then there's the final layer. A handful of people have reported that over time, the dream stops ending. It stops being a nighttime visitor and becomes a lurking presence behind every door they close. They'll find themselves alone in an elevator and suddenly hear the padded room's hum. They'll close their eyes at a dentist's office and feel the restraints. It's not just that the dream returns. It's that waking life starts to feel like the dream. That somewhere along the way, they slipped and never woke up. What if that's the real horror? Not that you had a terrifying dream, but that it was never a dream. That the life you're living now is the story you invented to survive that room. That every door, every hallway, every moment of quiet is just the padded world rearranging itself to look like freedom. So next time you find yourself hesitating at a closed door or shivering without reason in a bright white room, ask yourself, not if you've been there before, but if you ever really got out. Because the scariest prisons don't lock from the outside. They're the ones you don't even remember walking into.